All right, City Clerk, could you take the roll, please?
Alderman Wilson. Here. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Here.
Alderman Suffredin.
Here.
Alderman Ravel.
Here.
Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming.
Here.
Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen.
All right, thank you. I know that Alderman Rainey is out of town, and she won't be here today. I do expect the other two Alderman Braithwaite and Alderman Nguyen, to show up. I know they're on their way. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday, April 30th, 2018 special meeting of the Evanston City Council. This meeting was set up, as many people know, a long time ago, to focus on the issue of affordable housing. The council committed to looking at this issue once every quarter. And if you looked at the agenda today, we certainly have affordable housing. We want to have a robust conversation about that up here. But we also have some other issues, pressing issues that have come to bear. So I think we're going to have a good conversation this evening about affordable housing, but also about an issue that that many people up on this dais have been working on, and I'll talk more about when we get to the special order of business, but is about bus route changes to the CTA and Pace bus schedule. I do want to let people know in this room that we do have representatives from Pace and from CTA here, and I'm going to give them a minute when we get to that special order of business to make a couple remarks to us. So I just want to make you aware as people get up, if you're talking about that there are folks here who are partners of ours here in the city and who are here to listen. I also want to welcome the Washington School Girl Scout Troop, 40939. Girls, can you take a stand so everybody can see you? All right. It is very exciting to have you all here, and this is all part of their civics curriculum as part of the Girl Scouts, and so I think it's an opportunity for them to witness their local government in action, but it's also an opportunity for all of us, whether we're in the audience or up here at the dais, to show what good government looks like and civil discourse looks like. So thank you, girls, for being here, and let's show everybody what good civil discourse and respectful discourse means. It doesn't mean we all have to agree, but we can be civil about our disagreements, and I know we will be tonight. So with that, City Manager, do you have any public announcements?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. As I know many of you are aware, we have been very fortunate to once again be rated as a 4-star sustainable community by the Star Communities Organization. We are fortunate to have a member of the Star Communities Board, a familiar face here in Evanston, Catherine Hurley, our former Sustainable Programs Coordinator. Currently, Catherine is the Sustainability Program Manager at the Argonne National Laboratory. So, Catherine, welcome. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager Bobkowitz, and City Clerk Reed. So happy to be here tonight on behalf of Star Communities. I've been on the board of directors for the past 4 years and was able to be here when Evanston first received its STAR certification as an early adopter, showing true leadership in this program. There are now over 60 communities that are certified under the STAR rating system. Evanston is the first city in the nation to be recertified under the STAR 2.0 version. So in continuous improvement, we want to make things, take it up to the next level. And so the STAR 2.0 made everything a little harder. So Evanston being recognized again as a 4-star community and recognized for national excellence in community sustainability is really a wonderful accomplishment. How did Evanston get here? Many of you know, who are working tirelessly in all the areas that make Evanston a wonderful, sustainable, livable community, but it's really the partnerships with community members, community organizations that helped to collect the data needed, because a lot of data is needed. It's a data-driven system. And all those partnerships helped Evanston to receive 511 points, which far exceeded the minimum to get the 4-star certification. So that's fantastic recognition on behalf of the board of directors. So I just want to say thank you to all the good work of the members of Evanston community, of the city staff, and all the organizations that keep putting your information forward. There are many communities that were waiting in the queues to do recertification, and so Evanston showing that it can be done and is worthwhile is fantastic. So I have a wonderful plaque here to present to Mayor Haggerty on behalf of Star Community's Board of Directors and Hillary Varnadorn, the 4-star certification plaque.
I love that you double as a photographer.
Thank you for all your support for STAM.
And how exciting is it, right, that somebody from this city who moved on and went to Argonne Labs is on the board of directors for the Star Ratings.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to recognize 2 Evanston City staff members. As you know, with Catherine's departure, we needed to pick up the baton, and Johanna Leonard, who we have not seen for a while, is completing her maternity leave. So the Star Community's responsibility is now in our community development department. So Johanna, if you could stand, everyone would like to say hello and see you're doing well. And isn't it curious that in Johanna's absence, the person that really brought this home is Jim Hurley, no relation. So Jim is a management analyst in the Community Development Department. Jim, if you could stand up and be recognized. So I think we're going to have cake at some later point in the back so we can celebrate this achievement. And Mrs. Hurley, thank you very much. We wouldn't be here without your efforts, and hope all is well in Argonne. And that concludes my announcements.
Great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. City Clerk, do you have any announcements?
I have no announcements.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Clerk Reed. All right. We're going to move into the public comment section of the meeting. As everybody knows, we set aside 45 minutes. We've had 12 people that have signed up. We have a 3-minute limit on each speaker, and so we're less than the 45 minutes. So every speaker will be given up to 3 minutes if you need it. I ask that. Again, you just be thoughtful and respectful in the delivery of your message, and think about our Girl Scout troops that are right here, looking at how good government works. And then one other thing that I wanted to make an announcement of: we are not going to allow people to yield time, okay, to another speaker. So if you signed up to speak, you need to either speak or you can pass. But we're not gonna do that. So with that, I'll call off the first 3 speakers. And as usual, when you've got about 15 seconds left, if you're approaching that 3-minute mark, I'll give you a little nudge. And if you can wrap it up, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Dan Joseph is first, then Janad Rizki, then Sue Lobeck.
Good evening, everybody. Mayor Haggerty, I'll get your name, City Manager Wally, and City staff, and all the people. I'm Dan Joseph, a homeowner in Evanston with no mortgage, all paid up. And I used to work at CTA, bus operator, supervisor, control center, scheduler, using Hastis, and I loved everything in the field. I'm here concerning the proposed route changes on the 205, the 208, and 213. Economists use the term Occam's razor for stating when all things being equal, choose the simplest. In other words, the KISS method. With the plan changes for those routes, they're proposing a grid pattern, either east-west or north-south. And sometimes it works, and sometimes the people who ride it don't want it. For example, Pace is wonderful in changing the 250 Dempster bus to go to O'Hare Field. And incidentally, all those stops along Liggy, people ride too. So it's a wonderful choice, and it's going to be part of the Pulse system, so even be better. Now, the same thing could be done with the 205, 208, and 213. And here is my proposal. As PACE and CTA wish to drop the 205, do it. we can provide the service with other routes. The 213, which is on Green Bay Road, keep it the same in Cook County, starting at Davis Street. Now, my idea for the 208 is starting at Howard Station, going up to Chicago Avenue to Davis, Davis and Church to Dodge to Emerson Gulf, through Old Orchard and the courthouse, and either take Woods Drive by the Holocaust Museum or Harmons Road through the Forest Preserve back to Gulf. This way, there'll be service all day long, 7 days a week, to Evanston Township High School from South Evanston. Also, there'll be buses continuously all day to the courthouse. And also, we will have service on Saturday and Sunday on Chicago Avenue, South Evanston, because the L, although it's used, does not have handicapped access at either South Boulevard, Main Street, or Dempster. So it fulfills a need for people needing to get around at the densely populated places in Evanston.
We're at like 3 minutes, so.
Okay, if anybody has any questions or wants me to elaborate, I'm going to sit out in the anteroom for a little bit if people want to discuss with me. And thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you. And you made sure to give it to the CTA and the PACE folks that are here, right?
I found PACE. Where's the CTA?
All right. CTA, you want to raise your hand? All right. There's some CTA people back there. We'll get that to them, Dan. Thank you. All right. Janad Rizki, Sue Lallenbach, and then Olympia Baldwin Edwards.
Just got an email text from my daughter. She said, it'd be nice the Girl Scouts are here. She's watching this for the first time, my adult daughter. So, what I'm going to talk about, when Mr. Bobkowitz came here, we had a structural problem with the budget, and it's been 8 years, and now he hasn't really solved that problem, which is interesting. It should be clear to everyone that we're in quite a big mess here. My rough estimate, and I have basically a little prop I will show real quick, is we have probably, at this point, wasted 25% of our budget. Basically, this is basically a 25% property tax increase of all the things here that have been done wrong, mistakes, everything else. All these things that really are a waste of money. And I'll leave these with the clerk. Nobody's going to have time to read this, nor in the 3 minutes. But basically, we have so many problems here, I call mismanagement and all kinds of problems. And we can go through this list. We can talk about it. And we have a problem here with this kind of stuff going on, and that's really why we're in trouble too. It's one of the partial reasons why we're in trouble. What I see tonight with this priority-based budgeting, it is really a smokescreen. It is not real. Basically, you have a bunch of items up there, no numbers. I could go through items and say what's wrong with them and what's right with them by the numbers. And if you're not doing that, you're wasting time. This is a smokescreen to basically hide from the community the real problems. And frankly, there are some real problems. For a long time I have talked about the water. Now there are people upset about this water park, but the real question is, where are we getting the money to pay for the water park that the council wants or somebody wants, let's say? The water fund, we don't even know how that works. I've asked for 4 years to really tell us how the water fund works, and the city council cannot do it, nor could any alderman up here explain where that money is going to come from. So it's very interesting. And we talk about some big numbers for water sales. Well, you sell things, but you also have to have expenses. And you all know that. Some of you know that at least. And you have to have capital. And those costs eat away at that. So whether you make a profit or not depends on a lot of things. And the city hasn't proven that ever on any of this stuff. That's really why we have a problem here. And I was very fascinated that Gibbs Morrison now is wanting to be cut after we just wasted all this money on it. And frankly, it doesn't work. The place, if anyone who goes over there realizes it's a mess. And we can go on, but I think the council members better take a serious look at some of these things of what's going on here, because we really have some major issues. And I made another little prop, which I will probably leave these with the clerk.
We've got 15 more seconds.
All right.
Okay.
Take a good look. And it's basically our friend, the city manager, where our cash is going. telling you how he's going to solve the problems here. And budgets are about numbers. And I used to do a cartoon here with a pig called Ponzi. And what we have here is a Ponzi scheme. People should understand that. So I'll take my 15 seconds. Just one last point. You made a comment about speakers not giving time. I don't know if that's been changed officially. I don't believe the mayor can change that other than the council. Those are rules of the council. I know I was given a lot of time last time because some speakers were generous. You want to change it? Change it with the council rules, I think.
We'll take a look at the rules. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Next up, we've got Sue Lobeck, Olympia, Baldwin Edwards, and then Tim Russell.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Lobeck. I work at Connections for the Homeless and run a coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. We sent a letter to all of you thanking you for the work that you've been doing. And I'd like to say, you know, Joining Forces is impatient for more to happen faster. That's sort of what we see as our mission being. But I do want to say, with all the discussion that's been happening, I've been hearing about, you know, discussions behind the scenes that we're not involved in. Whenever I talk with any of you, this is coming up. There's a lot of conversation and I think a lot of thinking that will be moving us forward. So I want to thank you for that. One of the things I wanted to do tonight is just, one of the things I wanted to do tonight was just highlight a couple of pieces of research that Joining Forces has done. One shows that cities with comprehensive plans that include affordable housing are much more likely to increase affordability in their communities. The other one is that cities with affordable housing plans with strategies for using the affordable housing funding that's available through inclusionary housing are more likely to use those funds to actually increase the affordability as opposed to using them for other programming. Therefore, I just want to reiterate our continued advocacy for an affordable housing plan as being a top priority of the council, and hopefully one that has long-term goals, tangible goals, and multiple solutions to the problem. I want to thank you for your work, and we are eagerly watching for results. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sue. I'd also like to welcome Alderman Nguyen, who joined us, if we can make sure that's recorded, City Clerk. Next up, we've got Olympia, Baldwin Edwards, Tim Russell, and then Michael having a little trouble reading, maybe Donaroff.
Hi, my name is Olympia Walden Edwards. I am a student at Evanston Township High School, and I am speaking on behalf of myself and the students standing behind me. At ETHS, there are over 100 homeless students. While we go home to a comfortable bed, a warm shower, and a good dinner, many of our fellow classmates don't have a place to call home. The reason for this? The lack of affordable housing in Evanston. 30% of one's income is considered affordable, but more often than not, people are paying drastically more than this, and as a result, cannot live comfortably. We believe that in order to make housing in Evanston more accessible, we need to decrease how much housing costs and increase the amount of money that people make. More specifically, we need an affordable housing plan that eliminates zoning that creates barriers to affordability, provides incentives to landlords to increase affordability, and includes new strategies for affordability, such as employer-funded housing. We are aware that many people are opposed to the idea of affordable housing in their neighborhoods because they believe it will bring crime along with it and cause the value of their property to go down. I would like to shed some light on what affordable housing will actually do. First and foremost, it provides a foundation for people to build well-being and to reach their full potential. If that isn't enough, it will also cause crime to go down while the value of the surrounding property stays constant. There's no reason not to implement affordable housing, so why isn't it being done? We walked out for gun violence, but that isn't the only issue we are concerned and passionate about. We urge you to implement your plans and to do so with efficiency because this should be one of your top priorities as we want our fellow classmates and people in the community to have homes. Thank you for what you have been doing so far. We appreciate it and are looking forward to seeing even more action.
Thank you so much for coming out, all of you. Thank you. Tim Russell, you got to follow 7 ETHS students.
I know this is going
to
be difficult. Tim Russell, 5th Ward. Thank you, Mayor Haggerty, City Manager Bobowitz, and the entire City Council. I have some prepared remarks, but as I'm sitting here and thinking about today, I'm going to go off of my prepared remarks. Have a long career in diversity and inclusion. That's been my career. Trained as a theologian at Garrett. And I'm here to talk about the pumping station. Now, I understand we can't go back in time and vote, change the way the process went. And I will say that personally, I feel it was wrong. The Fifth Ward members feel it was wrong as well, how it was done, underhanded in our opinion. But I want to read a quote. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be unless you are who you ought to be. Today, I sat at 1718 Leland, where I live. It was warm, so I knew what was going to happen. I was going to smell the stench from the garbage, recycling, whatever we call it, 4 or 5 blocks up. I knew I was going to smell it. And you know what? I smelled it. And it's only 75, 78 degrees outside. Okay? And I know when the pumping station starts, we're going to have other issues. We can talk about clean water, all of these things. But now we have a community that is trapped, that has paid its unfair sense of providing our due diligence or whatever to the city. We've paid our debt. I had an opportunity yesterday to go and see a play produced by Tim Ward about the uprooting of the housing along the lake of African Americans. Okay? That was 100 years ago. And 100 years later, we're still in the same place, looking at an African American community that, for all practical sense and purposes, we discard because it's the Fifth Ward. Okay? Because it's the Fifth Ward. The conversations that were had would never have been taking place without residents, whether it was Central Street, whether it was along the lake, the conversation would have been had. I ask you that as we move forward, we're going to do what we need to do in the Fifth Ward to try to stop it. We know that you're not going to vote and change. We get that. But we're going to do what we need to do to stop it. But I want you to also think about Morton Grove, Des Plaines is hiring to build out the place. Something tells me those communities are not going to hire people that look like me from my community or from Evanston. Okay, where's that on the radar? Where's the whole supplier diversity aspect on the radar for the council? I know my time is getting up, but I do want you to understand that we're trapped between trash to the east, and we're going to have a pumping station just behind us. Only in the Fifth Ward would this take place. So thank you for the time, and I hope you do think about with the residents of Fifth Ward what we need and our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We've got Michael Donaroff, Sarah Vanderwick, and then Virginia Ayers.
Good evening. My name is Michael Donaroff, and I'm here on behalf of the student government at Northwestern, and I'm also a resident of the Fifth Ward. It's been over 3 months since City Council directly addressed the topic of affordable housing. During that meeting, I spoke about the 3 unrelated rule and its dangerous and unfair effect on students. There are motions at the time to refer this issue to the Planning and Development Committee and to take action. I thank the alder people that have spoken to me in the meantime. That being said, there has yet to be any action or referral in the City Council or in any committees. The problems with the 3 unrelated ordinance have yet to disappear, and nor are they new. The way that zoning ordinances are written in Evanston systematically disadvantages students, as well as many immigrants, other young people, and low-income individuals in the city who don't adhere to traditional and antiquated conceptions of households. Nevertheless, these people, myself included, are forced to band together to afford the often obscene rental costs in Evanston. As a result of the 3 unrelated rule, people living in these situations are left unable to use the protections available for tenants. They fear receiving a notice of eviction on their door directly as a result of city inspections that are meant to protect them. The city already has ordinances designed to protect against unhealthy living conditions, excessive noise, and unkept units. We need to use these laws. But the 3 unrelated rule is outdated and out of touch with the reality of this town. If Evanston really wants to live up to its claim that it is a welcoming city for all, Then I urge City Council to finally take action and remove or change the 3 unrelated rule as part of a comprehensive affordable housing plan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. We've got Sarah, Virginia, and then Misty Wittenberg.
Hello. I am Sarah Vanderwick, and I'm a resident of the First Ward. As I've looked at inclusionary housing programs in other cities over the recent months, there's a glaring difference between them and how Evanston operates. In most cities that have inclusionary housing ordinances, they use variances in zoning as the payback, basically, for affordable housing, as opposed to Evanston using its planned developments as in planned developments, it kind of gives the variances away. And I just want to put on your radar that as you look at the inclusionary housing ordinance and you think about, really, are we committed to affordable housing, and how is that going to happen, that you also look at the planned development ordinance and think about revising that so that the provision of affordable housing is a greater public benefit than, for instance, preserving natural vegetation, creating a pleasing environment, and other kind of vague public benefits that are listed in the planned development ordinance. Affordable housing is, under most affordable housing ordinances, the public benefit, and or the most important public benefit. So please keep that in mind. And I'd also like to say that as you think about affordable housing and inclusionary housing throughout the city, that you don't see any one ward as being unnecessary to this. For instance, in the First Ward, I believe our alderman thinks that there is enough affordable housing. I do not think that's the case, and that it would only be fair that we think about affordable housing in the First Ward as well as other places. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And we also had Alderman Peter Braithwaite join us. Welcome, Alderman Braithwaite. If we record that, City Clerk, and we have all the council members that will be here tonight. So we have 8 council members here. We've got Virginia up next, and then Misty Wittenberg, and then Cecilia Wallen.
Greetings to the mayor and the council members and the staff. This is my first time speaking before you. My name is Virginia Ayers. I've been a resident of Evanston since 1969. Came here as a graduate student, went on to work at Evanston Township High School, and retired as a department chair at Evanston Township High School. I still bleed orange and blue. I'm now a proud member and a new member of the Interfaith Action of Evanston Advocacy Team, advocating for affordable housing in Evanston. I want to thank this council for making affordable housing one of your goals and priorities. I've seen it written in many places. I'm pleased to see it, and I'm hoping to see lots of action. I want to say on the behalf of Interfaith that we're pleased to see this current work to revise and strengthen the inclusionary housing ordinance. And we're hoping that that committee will be meeting again real soon. From my own experience and learning from the experience of others, I know how important it is for the people who work in Evanston to also be able to live in Evanston. So please help make that become a reality. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Virginia, and welcome to Evanston City Council. All right. We got Misty Wittenberg, and then Cecilia Wallen, then Doug Sharp.
Good evening, City Council and staff. Misty Wittenberg, 5th Ward. 2525 Church Street is in the West End's Open Space District. It was budgeted, leased, and approved for the restoration and preservation of green space as an expanded park. The zoning laws are not unclear here. The city cannot legally claim a municipal use exemption if it does not own the structure. If the services, the water services, are not provided to Evanston, in this case, they will not be. I'm for Evanston water sales. That's not what's at issue here. I'm wondering if any of you see the irony in the city building a literal profit stream, the cost of which you're forcing upon a historically underserved, predominantly African-American neighborhood through a process in which you have deprived those residents of their civil rights to due process, for which the revenue will be used in part to replenish funds that were used last November to settle a racial discrimination lawsuit. I've been critical about the city here and in other areas. I have never publicly or privately ever disparaged anyone's character or anything personal other than what is within their public duties. I have limited my actions to what's within my legal rights and responsibilities as a citizen. The city's response has not been to disclose refuting evidence on any of these items. It has not been to do their own investigation or reports. Instead, it's retaliated against me in some frankly bizarre social media content. Alderman Rainey posted that I'm a founding member of a hate group and that my actions must be stopped. This was on a thread disclosing my home address and my husband's contact information, including his phone and his email.
Misty, I'm going to need you to wrap it up in like 15 seconds.
Fine.
We're over the 3.
Alderman Simmons used her public official page to promote that I'm a terrorist who has made a full-time job working to destroy her. The last person to engage in that thread immediately afterwards posted a picture of one of my 3 children in a post threatening to me. You guys need to take this seriously. You are supposed to enforce our rights, not hurt them.
Thank you, Misty. All right, Cecilia, we got Cecilia Wallen, then Doug Sharp, and then the last speaker is Patrick Donnelly.
Hi, good evening. This is also my first time. I'm Cecilia Wallen, and I'm addressing the CTA PACE issue. I need my glasses. Our family has lived in Evanston for 18 years, raising our 4 sons here without a car. We use public transit all the time. I share the community's concerns regarding the impact of the proposed bus route changes that would affect the ETHS families and students. I'll have an incoming freshman, our youngest. And I am most appreciative of the city's responsiveness and for the resolution advocating on our community's behalf. As the public hearing made clear, the proposed changes would also significantly hurt other constituencies. Our oldest son, who is 24, has a disability, and I know firsthand the transit challenges he and his peers face. I fault myself for not raising these concerns more publicly and pointedly when I made my previous comments about transit to ETHS, so I'm taking the opportunity now. Please consider the following as you work with PACE and CTA to modify service to fully address the needs of all Evanston residents. Many people with disabilities have no other transit option. A majority cannot drive and will never drive, and public transit is their only way of getting to their jobs, school, health care, shopping, and social activities. It is fundamental to their engagement with their communities. Generally, it is easier for them to access bus service than train service. The report's assertion that the Purple Line duplicates 205 service fails to consider the transit needs of people with physical impairments and other disabilities. As Dan Joseph pointed out, and I'm sure you're all aware, the majority of the Purple Line stations are not accessible. And for individuals like my son with a cognitive disability, traveling by bus is usually safer and more manageable, and there is a bus driver there available to help if necessary. People with disabilities often have part-time jobs, most often traveling to work at all times of the day, both peak and off-peak hours. Less frequent and less direct service places additional challenges on them. I understand the preference for a grid system in large cities and for connecting towns and suburbs, but in smaller cities like Evanston, it doesn't make so much sense. Having to transfer for short within-town trips makes travel more complicated, less efficient, and creates undue hardship. Again, someone like my son can do a bus trip when it's a single trip. Transfers, too difficult. People with disabilities have fewer social networks, and inferior public transit further reduces their opportunities for social interaction within their communities. As you all know, Evanston provides some excellent services for people with disabilities, adults, CIF, the special rec, but Public transit options to get to these activities are very limited, especially weekend and evenings. I'm hurrying up. Access to good public transit directly impacts individuals with disabilities, independence, and self-determination. The lack of it contributes to their marginalization. In your discussions with PACE and CTA, I hope the transit needs of everyone in our community are acknowledged and supported. Much of what I said also applies to individuals of lower economic status and older adults. It is about equity and access for all members of our community, especially those who sometimes cannot advocate effectively for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you for coming out for the first time. All right, we've got two more speakers. We've got Doug Sharp, and then the last speaker will be Patrick Donnelly.
My name is Doug Sharp, and I live in the 9th Ward. Mayor, council members, clerk, you recently received a letter jointly signed by Connections for the Homeless, the Evanston League of Women Voters, Interfaith Action of Evanston, and Reclaim Evanston. The 4 signing organizations commended the mayor and the members of council for the attention that the city of Evanston is devoting to the issue of affordable housing. As representative of Reclaim Evanston, I want to publicly highlight one of the recommendations made in that letter. That council take immediate action to resume the meetings of the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance Subcommittee. That committee was formed last fall and held its first meeting back in January. It met briefly in February. It has now been almost 3 months since the subcommittee has met. Winter is over, spring is here. The subcommittee and council needs to get on with the work of updating and improving Evanston's inclusionary housing ordinance. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Doug. All right, and then Patrick Donnelly is our last speaker.
You can deduct my walk-up time. I just have a gentle message for everyone. I'm with the Lake House Group. I just wanted to remind our city council that maybe the best thing Evanston ever did in a town where development was taking over the whole lakefront was to say, let's buy that mansion and that beach and just keep it open as a place for the community. And that's why I moved to Evanston. I was standing in that parking lot and I went, what? This big old mansion is for an art center? I'm like, I'm going to buy that house that we were looking at. I can't believe this town did that. And that's why I'm committed to this project. I think I'm a simple math guy. I do math every day. And the simple math is the building's there. It was left to the community, in theory. Maybe we should keep it. Let's just keep thinking about it. Let's keep thinking about a way to do this. It's not just about the $5 million fundraising. There's other answers too. So let's just keep thinking about it and talking about it. I know it sounds like 4 people maybe would vote yes. I think Ms. Fisk has worked harder than anyone to save this property, so maybe she's got the runaround burnout. She's tried for with Pritzker and with IADNR and with the Sigma Chi's. So people are trying to save this building. I think if you give this a chance, if you were to able to teleport yourself into the future and look back and see this place working, you go, okay, yeah, that was the right decision. So as the summer goes on, I'll wrap this up. I just want to say we're looking for a couple more votes, and we would like to talk to you all a little bit more, and we would like to keep this going. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you everybody for coming out and speaking so thoughtfully and passionately about lots of issues here in our city. We're going to move on now to the special orders of business. The first item up this evening is the resolution 25R18 supporting direct public transportation services to Evanston Township High School. What I would like to do is first acknowledge folks up on this dais. I know many of the aldermen have been working hard with constituents here in Evanston. Some of the aldermen here are directly along that route. I'm Alderman Wynn, Alderman Fleming, and Alderman Rainey. And so thank you, everybody, for working so hard. I also want to thank our County Commissioner, Larry Suffredin, who has really stepped in, as well as our Congresswoman, Jan Schakowsky, who sent a letter to PACE and CTA as well. So everybody's aware. I mean, I think we all have the same objectives. We want government to work, effectively and efficiently, and we want to make sure we're serving the people that most need the services of the government. We certainly respect that PACE and CTA want to make sure that they have a well-run operation, but we want to make sure that folks in our community who need the services that these buses provide are being, fairly treated in this process. I will stress this is a process. Our city staff have been working with PACE and CTA city staff for quite some time. The public meeting that was held recently was part of the process. This public comment that has come into CTA and PACE is part of the process. We want to make sure they certainly hear from us, the community, and again, we have heard from many, many people in the community that are concerned, and we share that concern. So the first thing I'd like to do before we get to this resolution is just to reaffirm, our commitment up here, is I would like to invite, if they would like to come to the podium, the PACE or CTA. I know Chris Canning is here, who is one of the commissioners, and Chris is also the former mayor of our neighbor Wilmette. Just for a little background, and would welcome you up, Chris, just to make a couple remarks before we start the conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having us here. As Mayor Haggerty pointed out, my name is Chris Canning. I am a member of the PACE Board of Directors, and I represent the North Shore portion of Cook County. I said at the beginning of the public meeting last week at Levy Center, and I went back and I checked my emails. It's a bad habit I had as an elected official, is I keep all my emails. And so I looked back, and it was in July of 2014 that I met with the manager, Mayor Tisdall, TJ Ross, who's here, who's the executive director of PACE, and myself. We met in the mayor's office, and one of the things we talked about as the meeting came to a close was Mayor Tisdall said, there's a lot of buses on the streets of Evanston. There's PACE buses, there's CTA buses, there's Northwestern buses, there are other types of buses. Maybe we ought to try to work on a way to reduce the number of buses here on the streets of Evanston. Well, 2016 was the kickoff of the CTA PACE North Shore planning study. And as the mayor said, this has been a process. And our respective staffs have worked with staffs throughout the North Shore region, including Evanston city staff and the staff at ETHS. A plan was presented, it was prepared, and what happened last week at Levy Center was a public meeting. And public meetings are important to the process because we did receive input. There were 97 people at the meeting. There were 36 people who spoke. There were 28 pages of comments. And one of the things that I said at the meeting was that we were tentatively putting it on the agenda for the PACE meeting in May. And I wanted to assure the City Council, as well as everyone in the Evanston community, I've also expressed this to Commissioner Suffredin, that the item will be on the May agenda for presentation of not only the plan, but the 28 pages of comments, Congresswoman Schakowsky's letter, Commissioner Suffredin's letter, your resolution, the comments we've received tonight, but there will be no vote whatsoever taken by the PACE Board in May. So what are the next steps? Well, since we had our meeting, we've had the comments, we've collected information. In fact, TJ was out there this morning doing his own count of what the boardings were at ETHS, and I think it was a little bit less than 87. We didn't know it was an early dismissal day because staff went out to try to get the number for the afternoon boardings, and school had already been dismissed. So CTA staff, PACE staff will work with this input, get further direction from our boards, and then come back to stakeholders such as the City of Evanston, the County of Cook, as well as ETHS, and see what can be done to address the concerns that were raised at the public meeting. But as the mayor pointed out, this is a process. Public meetings are an important part of the process. We thank everyone who has given their comment, everyone who attended the meeting, and we appreciate this, and we will continue to move forward on this process. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for the resolution. It will be distributed to the full board and be part of our packet.
Thank you, Chris. And what we're going to do is I'm going to did either you, TJ, or Mike, and if you don't mind introducing yourself and your role, so everybody in the audience and up here knows.
I'm Mike Connolly. I'm the Vice President of Planning for CTA. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council members, for giving us this opportunity to address you. I'd first like to thank the members of the Evanston community for their support of public transit. I'm always heartened to meet people who use public transit and appreciate the value that public transit provides in a community, as well as for those who have taken their time to share their comments and their feedback on the proposed service changes that were outlined as part of the PACE CTA North Shore Service Coordination Plan. We engaged the community in the North Shore area as a part of the study through steering committee meetings, open houses, and some onboard surveys that we did. The goal of this plan has always been to find ways to provide service to our customers where it's needed the most while providing service as efficiently as possible. Hearing from all of you and the community is an important part of redefining the service that we provide here. We know that any changes to our service can have an impact on the people and the communities we serve, which is why we've worked closely with Evanston and Evanston riders and the community leaders for the last 2 years as a part of this process. CTA and PACE are still finalizing the service plans. That includes reviewing and analyzing ridership data and patterns, as well as considering all of the feedback we continue to receive from the public. We will be getting back to you soon with a final service plan before presenting it to the PACE and the CTA boards in upcoming months. But thank you again for giving us this opportunity.
Great, thank you. Alderman Nguyen, do you have a question for him, or if there's another speaker, and then we'll open it up for any questions that folks have. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's your final. So do you guys mind if, in case there's questions for any of you from the council members? Okay, terrific. Then just stick around, and I'm going to open it up now for folks up at the dais. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, thank you all very much for coming tonight, but I would like to make a suggestion for any future public comment. I was at the Tuesday meeting at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I have to say, to hold a public hearing on such a vital service to the community on a weekday afternoon at 4:30 really is a disservice to the community. I can guarantee you if you'd had the meeting at ETHS on a Saturday or in the evening, you would have had many, many more people able to come and raise their issues. I went to the meeting. I was very impressed that nearly 100 people came. So I think in the future, especially for something like this, it would be greatly appreciated if public hearings were held at times when most of the public can come out and participate, because it's really important for the public to be able to engage and ask questions to PACE and CTA officials.
I asked the same question. Why are we starting at 4:30? I also asked a question of why you were starting at 6 o'clock tonight, but that was another issue. But let me have the Executive Director, TJ Ross, explain why 4:30, because there is actually a thought-out explanation for it.
Well, I would question why not a Saturday.
But just,
yeah.
Let me first address the 4:30 point.
Is always a juggling act to find the right time to have a public hearing, and what we attempt to do is to have it when there is bus service available, so people that use the bus service can come to the hearing and get home. If the hearing lasts till 6:30, they can get home. As you know, most PACE service is not evening service, so that's really why we take a look at trying to find a time that kind of spreads the time around so that we can get people home.
Then my next suggestion would be to have two, to have one on a weekday and then one on a weekend, because it's difficult for people who, if your children ride that bus to school but you work, you weren't able to come and participate in that meeting. Or work the hours that most people work, you weren't able to come and participate.
Yeah, we have no problem with doing two. We do multiple hearings on all kinds of things.
And
so that's a good idea.
And I'm chair of transportation and parking, and many times PACE or CTA has held multiple hearings, and I mean that's the best way to get the most public input. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson.
And just a quick comment with regard to the use of the website. If maybe you could have somebody take a look at how that's formatted, because I don't think it was particularly intuitive or easy to locate the information.
On the PACE website?
Right.
You're absolutely right. We're in the middle of redoing that whole website.
Okay, so if that, that made
that's a good observation, and
okay.
it's one that we're working on.
All right, thank you.
Are there other comments or questions up at the dais? Okay. Then thank you very much for your work, and we appreciate you working with us and addressing. I would just like to say, Cecilia Wallen, who was one of our public commenters, did talk about individuals that have functional needs and need that bus to get to the high school and everything, and hope that you will take that very seriously into consideration.
And she spoke at the public hearing.
Terrific.
We have all those comments.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. With that, is there a motion on Resolution 25R18?
I move approval.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. This resolution passes 25R18 8-0 by the City Council, and we'll send that on to CTA and PACE. Thank you very much for coming out. All right, next item up is SP2, the Affordable Housing Work Plan updates. Would City staff like to start this off, City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as we have done for the last few of these update meetings, we'd like to start with an overview of the work plan that the council has set out. Savannah Clement is here, our housing policy and planning analyst, and she'll give a brief overview of where we are on very specific items. And then SB3, SB4, SB5 are specific issues that we ask the council to consider. So with that, Ms. Clement, good evening.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Clerk Reed, City Manager Bobkowicz, and members of the council. As City Manager Bobkowicz said, I'm Savannah Clement, the Housing Policy and Planning Analyst with the city, and I'm just going to take you all through some quick updates on where we are with our affordable housing work. So we will highlight what's happened to date and then the action items that are on the agenda for tonight, and Sarah will actually cover those, so I'll take you through the first section. Okay, so activities to date, as it's been mentioned tonight, there's been 2 IHO subcommittee meetings. The meetings were put on hold until we could have a housing finance workshop, which has taken a bit more time than we anticipated with trying to secure speakers for that. We wanted to get experts, and people have busy schedules, so it's been hard to really nail down people. But fortunately, I can say that we do now have 4 panelists. We're going to do a panel presentation. It'll be on May 30th at 6:30 p.m. here in the City Council chambers. Our panelists are Colette English Dixon. She's from the Marshall Bennett Institute of Real Estate at Roosevelt University, and she will be the moderator of the panel. We also have Tim Clont. He's from the Federal Home Loan Bank, and he will provide the affordable housing finance lens on the panel. We'll also have Al Wheel from Wintrust, and he'll provide the market rate finance lens. And then we have Mark Mueller, and he is from Fulton Developers, which is in Highland Park, and so he has lots of experience with Highland Park's inclusionary housing ordinance, and so he can give us some lesson learned and opportunities, successes that he's had with that. Moving on to coach houses, the rental of non-family members was introduced on April 23rd and will be for action on May 14th. And then the next step we'll talk about later tonight about the accessory dwelling units and how we can look at that with a comprehensive approach. And then we also have our landlord rehabilitation assistance program that was approved by City Council on March 12th. We have put together all of the application materials. We're still working on a program agreement, which has to be finalized by legal. Once that's done, the program will be ready to go, and we can begin accepting applications and getting people into the program, which we hope to do by June. And then we also have the 3 unrelated occupancy rule. I think at the January 29th meeting, we provided a rooming houses memo. In the memo tonight, we've also provided some more information on co-housing. And really, this is just on the agenda just for direction on next steps and discussion among City Council members. And now I will hand it over to Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. Sarah Flax, Housing and Grants Administrator. First of all, I don't know if you would like to stop and discuss any of the things that have been brought up so far before we go on to other things, but let me know. Otherwise, we will
go on.
Okay. Action items. The city has been working with Evanston Township High School on a very successful home ownership program called coursework for students at ETHS called Geometry and Construction. And for 5 years, Evanston Township High School has constructed a single-family home, and the city has helped provide a lot on which that home will ultimately be placed, and Community Partners for Affordable Housing then sells the house to an income-eligible homeowner. One of the things that we were asked to do was create an intergovernmental agreement between the city and ETHS to memorialize roles and responsibilities and just keep that program moving forward. Michelle Mason-Cup and I and some others have been working on creating a pipeline of properties. We have 4 that we have identified right now, so we think we're in pretty good shape for up to 4 years. We are also talking to ETHS about moving into possibly doing accessory dwelling units and other types of housing as we get farther along. But the IGA is in your packet, and so we're asking consideration of approval of that so that we can keep that program going.
Okay, and I see that it's an action item.
Mm-hmm.
So I would move that we approve the intergovernmental agreement.
Sir.
Second.
Just for a little more history on this, so when in the fall, Alderman Ruth Simmons and I were involved, and we had suggested at that meeting, so I'm really glad that this has come forward, that we actually need something written on paper, so I think this is a smart idea as well. Okay, seeing no lights, all in favor of passing Resolution 26R18?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that resolution passes the City Council 8-0. I don't think I need a roll. Oh, thank you. Okay. Just so I know, as a new mayor, I'm still keeping that new mayor label as long as I can. On a resolution, City Attorney, I don't need to. Okay. And if there's money involved, it wouldn't be a resolution, I think. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for that. And another update, we're going to be having our first meeting later this week about moving the 5th home to its site, which is 2005 Gray Avenue. And then that home will be finished, and we're almost finalized on a property for next year, which we'll bring forward at an upcoming meeting. So, again, thank you very much on that. Another item with which we would like direction and guidance from the council is accessory dwelling units. We've taken our first step in, and as Savannah said, the rental of coach houses has been introduced, and once that is acted on, then we will actually do our amnesty and our, okay, let's see who has things they're renting already and make sure they're inspected and get on the rental registry. And one of the things we will work with property standards. Our goal is to make sure that each accessory dwelling unit, each coach house that is approved through that for rental, we establish the occupancy based on property standards occupancy, so that we really have a very straightforward and process for renting, allowing rental of those units to non-family members. We believe there's a great deal of potential in accessory dwelling units to expand affordable housing, accessible housing, and smaller houses in areas of our town where we are larger single-family homes, to integrate affordable housing throughout our community. And so staff is requesting direction or approval to begin work on an overall accessory dwelling unit ordinance so that we can codify how and when accessory dwelling units can be built out and under what terms they can be rented and all that good stuff on a broader basis. Accessory dwelling units have become one of the most
effective tools in integrating greater density into single-family neighborhoods without changing the whole character of those neighborhoods, and we think it's a very important next step. In your packet is a rather massive piece of work done by the American Planning Association working with AARP. AARP is particularly interested in accessory dwelling units because of the many benefits that it has for seniors, including the being able to help seniors age in place, whether they're aging in place in their existing house and have an accessory dwelling unit they rent out, or whether they actually move into a smaller unit that is more accessible and frequently could meet their needs in terms of space and any mobility issues they may be having, but still allowing them to age in their neighborhood and in place. I have spoken to Kyle Smith at the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. He is the Director of Housing and Community Development for that team, and there is a broader interest across the Chicago metropolitan area, and he is actually working with AARP to perhaps get some community education going, and is looking forward to actually working with us if we have that interest too, which I think would be great. And our Age-Friendly Evanston Task Force has also indicated a real interest in being involved in this.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's stick with SP4 right now. I see some lights up here. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Sarah. This is really a question about process. Mr. City Manager, does this come to go to the Plan Commission and then to P&D, or how do we? I've got tons of questions, and I did read the AARP report and thought it was really interesting, but obviously this affects our zoning ordinance and all sorts of things. It's very complicated. So where does it go?
Members of the council, Alderman Fisk, I think it's really up to the council to decide. If the council wishes to have additional preliminary discussions, then I think a referral to P&D makes sense. If the council feels at this point that it should go to the Plan Commission, then it would go there. So I think it's really, if the council feels they'd like to have more in-depth discussion before it goes to Plan Commission, then I would encourage P&D. If not, send it to the Plan Commission.
Okay, I would really encourage that. As chair of P&D, I think encourage coming to P&D, okay, and then to Plan Commission. Yeah, I mean, it's my mind is.
And we're here we're here looking for direction. So.
Okay, so that would be my recommendation. Can I just say one thing that's slightly off topic here, but I think it's on topic but off topic. As part of our aging in place and trying to reach those folks who want to stay in Evanston and have not been able to do that, we actually talked to the Housing Authority of Cook County some time ago looking for ways. I think the mayor was also invested in this, about ways that we could work together. There is a proposal now in my ward, and we are very interested in affordable housing in the first ward. We have a lot of it, but we're interested in more. But from the Housing Authority of Cook County to add, I think, 80 units, Eric, is it 80 units to the 1900 Sherman building that are not subsidized but targeted to the in-between aging in place person 55 and above. So I'm very encouraged about that. So things are happening. I just couldn't see another place to plug that in, but wanted to make sure everyone knew about it.
That's pretty big news that Alderman Fisk just shared there. So
yeah,
I don't know if other people up here at the dais knew that, but it's
very cool.
It's pretty exciting in Cook County. The Housing Authority of Cook County is a great partner, and we're hopeful they can bring this project here to Evanston. So it's wonderful. All right, we've got Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. And great research. We're not inventing a wheel, so there's been a lot of work on this done already. One thing I just want to ensure that we have, from my own perspective, is some kind of registration and certificate of occupancy for when the unit is going to go online, so to speak, to ensure that it is smoke detectors, everything that's necessary per the code. To make sure that that's in the ordinance draft. And I agree with Alderman Fisk's suggestion to go to planning development.
Just so I'm clear, when you guys are suggesting, having a hard time talking, suggesting sending it to planning and development, and that's SP4 and I presume SP5?
We haven't quite got there yet.
I know we're talking about SP4 right now, but okay. All right. We're just keeping on. All right. SP5 is even harder than SP4. Okay. Alderman Ravel.
I was just also going to echo Alderman Fisk's recommendation that it come to planning and development. I think there are a lot of policy issues that we want to talk about before we let the Plan Commission get into sort of the zoning nitty-gritty. So we'd welcome a comprehensive examination of this subject.
Terrific. Seeing no more lights, would someone like to make a motion for SP4?
That we refer this to the Planning and Development Committee.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, SP4 is going to be moved to the Planning and Development Committee and on an 8-0 vote. All right, let's go on to SP5. Sarah, do you want to give a preview of that?
I do. Another strategy that we would like to pursue and are seeking council direction on is what we're calling small lot housing for home ownership. One of the things that we've talked about a great deal is the the escalating cost of housing is basically pushing out a lot of younger families that are trying to move into Evanston, as well as older people who want to live in smaller homes and stay here. So it's definitely having impact on our residents and who can live here and who can own. We have fairly, like most places, fairly stringent zoning that is set, Euclidean zoning to accomplish consistency and make sure that we have a healthy and pleasant environment and all that good stuff. But one of the things that we would like to explore is a special use to take a lot or a parcel and say, how could we perhaps get small lot housing that could be ownership that doesn't really fit our existing zoning. It may be smaller footprint, a smaller lot size. It may be a different configuration. One of the things you sometimes see when small lot housing is developed is you'll have a parcel, and instead of having all the homes facing the street, you'll have a laneway or a access to those homes, and they're off of that. I mean, that's just one example. I'm not saying that we would necessarily recommend that, but we have some odd shapes and sizes of parcels in Evanston, and I think that there's an opportunity to use some of those in creative ways, and we have some very interesting projects going on to investigate how we can do housing more affordably, energy efficiently, and just smarter. And so rather than trying to design zoning that gives us a different set of regulations that we absolutely have to meet, we would like to have the opportunity to come up with something that is much less specifically restricted, but is handled on a case-by-case basis, so there is the opportunity for neighborhood input and council input. So it's not like anyone can go out and just randomly put together some development that is going to be different from our zoning, but it would be a considered process to see how we can use parcels and maybe create housing types and affordability that we can't currently develop.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Alderman Wilson.
Okay, and as you were talking, you covered a bunch of the things I was going to ask about. Okay, so thank you for that. But I appreciate this suggestion and this idea and initiative. And it seems like a million years ago, but back when I was on the ZBA, this would come up from time to time, and it was hard to say no to some things that seemed like generally pretty good ideas, but there just wasn't a legal path for people to take to get there. And you also made an excellent point about the difficult spaces. I know that in my ward and others, it's resulted in some very creative uses of the physical footprint of the lots and such, but also very interesting structures that they're nice to have in the neighborhood. So the creativity I certainly appreciate in my community. And the other point is that generally speaking, the trend is taking down small houses and putting up big houses. So you don't have any, to me there ought to be some ebb and flow instead of just, ebb and, knock everything out. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that this can be something that can be utilized to create some balance in what is available throughout the city. So I would like to have this also go to Planning and Development Committee for some follow-up.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Yeah, this needs to come to P&D as well. So looking at history of Evanston, just kind of figuring out how we got here from there. I mean, 100 years ago, large homes, large lots, and if you look especially at well, actually at all the wards in Evanston, I mean, just how Evanston developed from those lots being filled in, smaller houses being moved off the lakefront into the 5th, 6th, 4th wards, the 8th and 9th ward developing on southwest Evanston after the war, large parts of that. I mean, so we've done a lot of this. We've been through a process of infilling the city in interesting ways. When we were working on the Northeast Evanston Historic District, for example, it was interesting to me on Central Street, in the 700 block of Central Street, there are flag lots, which are 2 houses facing the street, but then a little walkway going through, and in the back, there's another house that no one really knew about. And so that there are a lot of ways, I think, to do this. I think the tricky part is going to be how we work this in our zoning ordinance, whether these become special uses, how we manage it. And that will be interesting. Obviously, we've done it before, so I'm quite sure that we can figure out how to do this again. But we're going to have to think, I think, creatively about our zoning ordinance, and that's going to be tough. But obviously, the discussion is an important one to be having.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk. All right, seeing no more lights, we had a motion by Alderman Wilson to move this to. Before you do that, Alderman Reese-Simmons.
I'd like to make a recommendation or referral. We have a city-owned lot at 2122 Darrell that is a large lot or a double lot. If we could use that as an example to explore small lot housing with the right partner.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Would someone like to move a motion?
So I move that we refer this to the Planning and Development Committee.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, SP 5 moves to the Planning and Development on a vote of 8-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman, let's go to Alderman Revelle. Before SP 6 moves us to priority-based budgeting, what I'd like to do is stay on the topic of housing if there's additional things that folks want to talk about. So we'll go to Alderman Revelle and then Alderman Wilson.
Right. Yes, I do have 2 items. The first one is a referral to staff. And as a little background, in 2017, Northwestern entered into a solar decathlon competition, built an energy-efficient home. They FedExed it to Denver, Colorado for the competition. They FedExed it back home. And it did very nicely. It was a really lovely home. But one of the difficulties they experienced while they were doing that is they didn't know where they were going to put the house when it came back. But luckily, a resident in my ward raised his hand and said he'd love to buy the house, and it's going to be installed on Wesley Avenue pretty soon now, once he builds a basement for it. But so Northwestern is now in the very early stages of preparing for the next solar decathlon, which is going to be in 2020. And they decided this time they'd like to identify the site first so that they knew what they were building for and they wouldn't have to scramble after the fact to look for a home for it. And the Solar Decathlon folks have been in conversation with me and with Sarah Flax to talk about the possibility of finding a city-owned site. And we've identified a potential site. It would be big enough for 2 units, actually, and possibly with an ADU, which would give us another chance to do some experimenting. And the idea is that we would put this in a land trust, and so that eventually, once the homes were ready to be passed on to their new homeowners, they would be permanently affordable housing for two families in Evanston. So I would like to direct staff to continue to explore this option and then come back to us with the proposal once it's all the details have been worked out. And we certainly, of course, want to work with nearby neighbors to make sure that they're comfortable with this whole idea as well. So is that just something I just refer and it's done?
Okay. Well, I would be curious, though, if the property is in your ward, and where is it? I mean, I realize
I've talked with the alderman whose ward it's in, but it's not in my ward. I feel like it's a little premature to tell the whole public where it is. I mean, I'm happy to do that if you'd like, but
I think it's, I mean, just bringing it up, I would say yes, you should probably.
It's a city-owned property across from the service center, small parking lot.
Which is right near City Hall, right over here. That lot we go by actually on Simpson. I think.
Would they build the ADU as a solar project too?
I think that's all still to be decided, but everything would be super energy efficient. That's for sure. It would be a learning laboratory for everyone in the community to learn about how to use some innovative energy efficient techniques, and then it would be a wonderful home for two new families.
Great.
Thank you, Alderman Ravel, and so city staff will work on that. Alderman Wilson.
Two things. I do want to make a pitch for the upcoming, and it's a tentative date, but the presentation panel discussion that Ms. Flax was talking about. I know that our staff has worked very, very hard and diligently to line up that panel, and it was a bit of a challenge just to get the right set of skill sets that we want to hear from. So I'm grateful for that. And so tentatively for May 30th, but that's final. Okay. It's set. Okay, so mark your calendars, May 30th. I think it's going to take place here in the council chambers, so we can record that and then post it online. The other point is earlier in the conversation, we did have the three unrelated issue on for direction. I'd previously made the reference that I would like to repeal the ordinance. I would just like to have that added to an agenda, and I would suggest we refer that to the Planning and Development Committee.
Okay.
So I move that we refer the repeal of the three unrelated ordinance to the Planning and Development Committee. Alderman
Fisk.
I just moved.
Well, do I need? Let's have a.
It's on the agenda, but it's for act. It's requesting direction. So
let's see if there's a second to Alderman Wilson's motion.
I did second.
I'm sorry. Okay, Alderman Fisk.
In conversation with the city manager, I'm chair of Planning and Development. So in conversation with the city manager, we had talked about, based on a meeting that Alderman Ruth Simmons and I had with the public, and I don't remember, was that in February? I don't remember when it was, of waiting to see what the impact was of the sophomores being required to live on campus. So we anticipated that we would have better data next year at this time. And that would be something I think that would inform our discussion. And I think it affects Alderman Ruth Simmons and my ward in slightly different ways than it affects most other wards. And I just think that if we move ahead right now to do this, we're missing a really big piece of the discussion. So I would ask your indulgence not to forget about that, but to understand where we're coming from and to allow us to take that time to get that information.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Fisk. Alderman Fleming?
So I had another, question. I made a referral at one of our other affordable housing meetings for something to come back to transportation and parking, and it was the assessment of the parking lot on South Boulevard. east of Chicago Avenue. And we look at that parking lot that's, from my assessment, not well used to be a potential site for some affordable housing. And that report never came back.
So let's do this. And Alderman Wilson has a motion that was.
Oh, but I do have a comment for that too. I just didn't know if you wanted to.
All right, give that, and then I'll have staff come up and just give an update.
Okay.
To your first.
So I understand, Alderman Fisk, your desire to see how housing needs and trends kind of change in your ward. However, the three unrelated is something we've heard about a lot from public comment, and we've talked about, kind of tossed back and forth here. And I know in my ward there are people who have space that they would like to either rent out or have a roommate or such, and are trying to abide by the three unrelated. So I guess I'm not really clear on why waiting a year makes a difference. If the thought is that sophomores are going to move on campus, and so maybe you have less complaints or less need for, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know that it does affect people in my ward as well, and they've been trying to wait, and they've been trying to see if we're going to move forward on this. I know the coach house was one part, but probably more in my ward than the coach house is the ability for people to, for us to take back the three unrelated rule so people can access some more housing here in the city. So I would like us to at least have a discussion to move forward. I'm concerned if we wait for a year and we find, I'm not sure what your data is going to show, but that we potentially limit people's ability to stay in Evanston or have affordable housing even outside of the wards that are closer to Northwestern.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. We're going to go Alderman Fisk, then Wilson, then Ravel.
I think they were ahead of me, but I'll go anyway. Alderman Fleming, again, historically, it's an interesting discussion because you can have a family living in a house and they can have two unrelated people living in. I mean, that's a lot of us when we bought our houses, and, when my husband and I bought our first house and he was in law school and I was at home with a baby, we had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in our attic. We rented them out to students. And that was, you were allowed to have two paying guests in your house. And that's where the three unrelated rule came from, was there could be a family, however large that family is. You can have 15 family members living in there, but you couldn't rent out to more than two unrelated people. And so I don't think that this is putting anyone at a disadvantage. I think if someone wants to rent out now, that they can. But this is a large change, and it directly impacts folks in my ward and has if you were at the meeting with Alderman Rusimmons and me, you would have heard it all. People are really, really concerned about this. Now we can have that discussion at P&D, and all those folks can come out and we can do that. But what we sort of decided that night was there's a big piece of this information that's not there, and how it's going to affect properties in the 5th Ward and in the 1st Ward if that rule is changed before we know how the properties are going to be affected as far as developers are concerned. So if you kind of look at the map on rooming houses, I know we haven't talked about that tonight, but if you look at that map and you just see the concentration of what the housing needs are and the transient housing needs are in our ward, our 2 wards as they come together, it's a big discussion, and the three unrelated is part of that. And I just quickly will share that along the 2100 block of Sherman Avenue, where a number of single-family houses have turned to 3 flats. Right now, there are 9 people who can live in that 3 flat. If it changes to 4, there are a dozen, and people are concerned about this. So that the result of sophomores living on campus may mean that houses turn back into more affordable housing for permanent residents. I don't know, and this is part of the discussion, is that we simply don't know. And if we're going to make an informed decision, I think we need to have all the information that we can. And I don't think that people in other parts of the city are necessarily badly impacted at the moment if we stick to the 3 unrelated. So.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Fisk. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. I enjoy all of our local press coverage, but I particularly enjoyed the Daily Northwestern has been doing like republishing old front pages, and I happened to catch one. They republished a November 18th, 1975 front page, and one of the headlines was "Evanston Housing No Bargain." So, in 1975. This is in an era when they were talking about how real estate agents didn't want to rent to, quote, dirty hippies, and they refer to the students as agitators. So, however, it references the, they called it 3-in-1 at the time, but there's a reference to that it being an issue for the students back in 1975. So that really... seeing that made a big impact on me today. So I've felt pretty strongly about it for a while, but just the idea that this kind of has lingered for over a quarter century, going, on half a century. I just think it's time to move the conversation forward. I understand, Alderman Fisk, I understand that there are points that do require discussion, but I really want to move this forward and have that conversation. So I would just request that we do set this on a planning development committee for a date certain, so we can move the conversation ahead.
Okay, Alderman Ravelli, you on this topic or a different topic? Okay.
Yes, well, I have an idea of sort of a variation on expanding this 3-in-1 rule that would maybe allow us to go forward a little bit, but while we still wait to gather the data about what happens in those neighborhoods once the student resident requirement kicks in. And that would be the idea that we could consider expanding, allowing more than 3 unrelated persons in an owner-occupied dwelling home. So that would be a way for senior citizens, for example, or lower income people who have a large home. They have a lot of bedrooms, and they really could benefit from being able to rent out more than 2 of them. Just something to consider, whether making it an owner-occupied expansion of the 3 unrelated rule would be a way to move forward.
Alderman Fisk.
And that's a good suggestion. And that's actually why I recommended the rooming house concept. Because what rooming houses allow you to do, and there are rooming houses in the First Ward, and what they allow you to do is if you're a transient person or even a permanent resident, you can rent a room, and it's licensed and it's inspected, and you get clean sheets every week, and there's someone on site who is actually taking care of you. I mean, what I'm concerned about is, and it doesn't mean that that should stop. I mean, that your suggestion would stop. But I've seen developers come into my ward and pay extraordinary prices for houses and then subdivide them. And the neighbors are so upset because the residential character of the neighborhood changes. And so I think it would be helpful to have an owner living in. My strong suggestion is that it not be an LLC, not be a 1% or 2% owner, but be a real owner of the property on title living in that property, because we've seen it work the other way too. I think that's, again, it's part of the discussion. No one is trying to keep students from having good, clean, safe, affordable housing. It's just, how do we do that and protect the residential neighborhoods, make permanent residents feel comfortable, and it's a balancing, but we certainly can do it. I have not had one complaint about the rooming house on Orrington Avenue in my ward, not one. And there are probably 8 people living in that house along with the live-in owner. So you can do this. I mean, we have a law on the books that you can do this. And why don't developers want to do that? My guess is that they would rather not have to be licensed and inspected, and that's not a good reason for me. So thank you for that. I think we can certainly, talk about that. But again, it's complicated, and our purpose really is to make sure that everyone is safe and comfortable and not paying exorbitant rents. I think, when kids go out and they rent a house and then suddenly one of them is on the lease and wow, how are they going to pay for that? It's difficult. And so we've talked to Northwestern about perhaps coming up, and again, we covered this at our meeting, and I'm sorry most of you weren't able to be there, but we talked about strategies for how to help students understand what the process is and what their legal obligations are when they sign leases. So it's an important growing learning lesson here, but we're trying to take care of everyone. I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to prevent anyone from having good affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Fisk. I want to. We've got a motion on the floor that was seconded. We're looking for Alderman Nguyen, who stepped out, because I want to take a vote on that motion. But I'd like you to. Let's see. Here comes this. Yeah. So, can you restate the motion, Alderman Wilson?
Yes, I would like to set the issue of the 3 unrelated ordinance and my suggestion that we repeal that for a date certain at a planning and development committee meeting. I don't have it off the top of my head. So, what's the next date?
The next meeting is May 14th.
Okay, so May 14th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, City Clerk, could you take the roll on that motion?
That we set the 3 unrelated, the 3 unrelated conversation for May 15th.
14th.
Well, my original reference was for repeal, but I understand that we're going to talk about it, and we might not do that. But it's just that.
But so you want to send Alderman, so you want to send it to P&D to put on their agenda and for discussion. If it moves out of P&D, then it goes to the council. If it doesn't, then it
right. I want to repeal it. Not everybody. I assume.
Okay, so this right now, your motion right now is just to move this item to the Planning and Development Committee. It's not the repeal of it. It's discussion.
A discussion of the 3 unrelated ordinance.
But if the city staff had to put an ordinance in front of that committee for discussion.
Well, that's why I had to get, that the original reference was for repeal. So we could, hopefully that's what happens. But if there's an alternative proposal, that happens all the time. We work things up and they change and they evolve. So. But it just has to be on the agenda for something. So,
and just to be clear, the motion is for discussion, so we will not have a prepared ordinance, or is it?
Right. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's what's put forward. Is there a second to that motion?
It was seconded by Alderman.
Okay. All right. Can you take the take the roll?
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton.
Aye.
Alderman Ravel. Aye. Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk. Aye. Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen.
Okay. All right. Alderman Wilson's motion is passed on a vote of 8-0, and that will go to Planning and Development for discussion. Okay. Alderman Ravel.
Yes, I did have a second item that I wanted to bring to the council. I would like to move that we direct the Housing and Homelessness Commission to develop an affordable housing plan to bring to us for our consideration. I guess I need to wait for a second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Then let me just kind of elaborate a little minute. I mean, obviously, we would continue the discussion that we've been engaged in thus far, working on revisions to the inclusionary housing ordinance, discussion about the 3 unrelated persons issue, expansion of auxiliary dwelling units, special use for small lot housing, and all those things would continue to work their way through the standing committees and come to the council. But the Housing and Homelessness Commission would work on an affordable housing plan that would give us a much broader framework and a way to really measure the success of all of our efforts, as well as come up with additional strategies. And I guess I envision that the plan would assess the housing needs of the various populations within our community, identify strategies to meet the needs of each of these different populations, outline clear goals and measurable outcomes, and then recommend priorities for focus and action, and that they would work with the broader community to develop this plan and come to us with that for our consideration.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Alderman Revelle, for raising the issue. I guess in my mind, we finally elevated this issue, something that we've been wrestling with for years now, and I feel like it has the attention of full council. So I'm just trying to understand the goal, and I'm not, again, it's just a general question. What are you expecting your committee to do that we're not asking our staff to do in front of full council?
Well, right now we have a set of action steps that the staff has put together when they developed the white paper for us several months ago, and those are really very important action steps and strategies that we're working on. But there are potentially other strategies that we need to really address the full range of needs of the various populations in our community, and that the plan would help us really identify just what those needs are. They would help us set priorities, like which populations are the ones with the greatest needs, or the ones that where should we be focusing our attention and our affordable housing funds, for example. So I think we need this broader framework to be able to really make sure that when we get to the end of the list of action steps that the staff has put together for us, I can't imagine that we'll be finished with our job, and this plan will help us continue to move forward in a comprehensive way.
I would just add to what Alderman Revelle is saying, and I don't have a vote, but I support this suggestion. I think that the Housing and Homelessness Commission can help the city and the council in terms of how do we best want to, how should we think about spending the money that goes into the Affordable Housing Fund, right? There's lots and lots of needs throughout the community. We're aware of those, but I think having a board or commission really do a lot of thought and stuff. I think it's difficult for the 9 of us out here to say, okay, this is how it should be, but they may come back and say, you know what, 50% of the funding should really be focused in this area, 20% in this area, and they can come back and the council can react to that. But I think that that's something that's missing right now. From our plan is really a strategy on how we are using the affordable housing funds when a developer opts out, and that is the case certainly at 831 Emerson, and money will be coming in for that. Alderman Fleming.
I guess so. My thought is I guess like Alderman Braithwaite, I appreciate, but I'm a little hesitant to send it to committee or commission and then have it come back and then we're prolonging. I mean, I like that you said we're going to keep going, but I guess I'm just hesitant, and maybe that comes from all the conversation about the downtown Evanston plan and all the confusion that caused when people felt like they put their time into a plan and they presented the plan and then we didn't do anything with the plan. And that being very fresh in my mind from the last development conversations, I do not want to set another group of people into motion on a plan that we have the potential to say thanks but no thanks, which we would have the right to say. And so I guess I would propose it maybe to be an affordable housing assessment or an affordable housing best practices. Just again, I'm very leery of saying you bring us a plan and have these folks spend their hard time on that, and we potentially could just table it, and then years to come people saying, well, we did that affordable housing plan, you did nothing with it. And maybe I'm just reacting to the screaming that we had over the last couple months. But I would love an affordable housing assessment, because what I think in my mind we have available, maybe we don't, or what the need is. I hear from a certain group of people about what the need is, but I don't know that that's the need throughout the whole city. I mean, I like the idea I don't want to call it tiny houses, the small lot housing. But if I think about my ward, I don't know if we even have lots available. So that kind of thing for me is more beneficial if we have a group in the community who's interested in helping us brainstorm, because we don't have time to necessarily, or I don't, to go out and do all this, and I don't know that the staff does either. And even with the best practices, so how have other communities use a pot of money they have for affordable housing? And I guess I would like them to go more. And maybe that's what they're thinking in this plan anyway, but again, I'm very leery of saying make a plan and then have the community hear us say that, and then we not stick to it, and then everyone's mad at us.
If I can respond.
No, let's go to Alderman. I was thinking about saying something. Let's go to, but I didn't. Let's go to Alderman Wilson, then you, Alderman Ravel.
Okay. I see the merit in all those points. And Alderman Fleming, I think with regard to where we're at right now, we do have, and I'm agreeing, we do have a number of action items that are being, we're in the process of approving and hopefully approving them all. And maybe some of those can evolve. We also are working on the inclusionary housing ordinance, which when that presumably is revised in maybe the next quarter, that's also going to set some parameters for what the universe of available tools is going to be. So maybe at the moment, it's generally a good idea, but maybe it's a little premature to start that until the group kind of has a better sense of exactly where we've ended up with some of these proposals, particularly the funding streams and what's going to be available. I didn't think of that at first, but in listening to Alderman Fleming and Alderman Braithwaite, those points came to mind. So, if there was a significant change in how that's going to be structured, that would be relevant. And there are also some other things, not that we should wait on the federal government for anything ever, but it didn't escape our staff's attention, that HUD's thinking about making some changes on the minimum contributions for low-income housing, and that would have a pretty significant impact here in town, and that potentially would be immediate, and we would hopefully want to be proactive and prepare for that so that we have some cash flow available to cover that gap if that gap instantly appears. So things like that are kind of like coming up on us, and it wouldn't really lend itself to the longer term. So maybe do that in 3 or 4 months or something.
Well, it seems to me, Alderman Fleming mentioned the need, a needs assessment. That would be the first thing that this planning process would involve, would be looking at what are the needs and what.
That would be great to get the needs assessment.
And so, I'd rather, it seems to me to be good to be getting started on that. And certainly the commission would be paying close attention to the work of the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance Subcommittee as well as the continuing efforts of the full council. So I guess I see them working in tandem, and it could take, the Housing Commission only meets once a month, and if we're going to be engaging some of the broader community in our discussions, those kinds of things do take a while.
Thank you, Alderman Morrell. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Just following up with staff, I asked for that maybe about a week ago. Do we have any response to that in terms of numbers, deficiencies, a needs assessment, how many units were short?
Alderman Ruth Simmons, we have not completed that. We've started work on it, and it's based on the numbers that we have in the white paper. It's really doing an assessment of how much, what the gaps are. One of the things that happens is the data we use in all of these assessments is several years old. And so I think that there is a need to hear from the community as well about changes that are going on that we may not catch through that, and really look at it as a combined thing. We can look at the what's called the CHAZ data, which is, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but HUD has this data developed by the Census Bureau for it, where they look at the percent of households at various income levels that are severely housing cost burdened and housing cost burdened and aren't housing cost burdened, both for ownership and rental. And, we can look at that and say, well, we clearly need to have this many more affordable units, but that's a point in time, and realistically, I don't think we will ever provide for all the needs. So, but we can certainly do that as a framework. But how we then move on from that is the next step. And we're working on that, but we don't have it completed for you.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. I think that piece is very important. I'm glad that you brought it up, Alderman Fleming, because like, what are our goals? I mean, do we need more 50% AMI, 60% AMI? I personally think this is a discussion that should be in partnership with economic development. We have a wage disparity here. So even if we did have more units with our average income here, many of those that are in need still will not qualify for affordable housing based on whatever AMI you're at. So just so that all the other departments and the city council is really thinking about the total needs of the city and not providing units that we still can't house the families that are in need because of their income. So if we could look at like what units we need, where are the shortages, so we can prioritize and come up with a percentage of should 50% of the money go to increase in home ownership, or are we not prepared for increased home ownership for that population?
I think staff, either working by itself or with the Housing and Homelessness Commission, can certainly put those numbers together. But then I do think the council has to look at how to prioritize that, and that's, I think, what we can work on. And we can do that either just as staff and bring it, or we can do it with the Housing and Homelessness Commission at your direction.
Okay,
We've begun the work.
Seeing no more lights, it seems like we've got some differences of opinion up here. What if we did this? What if we asked staff to work and flesh out what a, scope of work would be for, the Housing and the Homelessness Commission? Because again, we have a really valuable citizen commissions here in this town that are doing a lot of work. I do understand, Alderman Fleming's standpoint. I was on one of those commissions a long time ago. I think that none of the recommendations were taken, and maybe the issue is still going on here. So I know that, but I also know that these boards and commissions do a lot of good work, and oftentimes their recommendations are accepted. And the risk for any of us when we're on these is sometimes they go in a different direction. That's just the way it is. But having staff come back with a scope of work for what we could task them in this area of affordable housing, I think could be valuable for the council, and then we could react to that, and that might be easier than us trying to piece it together up here. Does that sound like a okay plan? Then, seeing no objections, city manager, if you could have the city staff put something together, a scope of work, okay, and then we can react to that in a future council meeting. Would be good.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think as Ms. Flack said, a lot of the information is already known to us. I think we just need to put it in a proper sequence. My question for the council would be, when would you like to discuss this next? You had said at the beginning of the year you were looking at quarters. July has another one of these pesky fifth Mondays, if you're interested in that. Otherwise, I think perhaps with the summer months, maybe just going for the third Monday in July, which we would normally have a meeting. We would come back, I think, with the updates as we've had tonight, any further work, anything that comes out of planning and development. A couple of things have been referred there, plus then this request for a sort of a proposal of what a plan would look like. So I think it's the 15th or 16th of July is the third Monday, or the 16th, I'm sorry, 16th of July or the 30th of July. If there's a preference.
My preference, I know I'm out of town on the 16th. My preference would be the 30th. But I know everybody has different calendars. Alderman Revelle and Alderman Fleming.
My preference would be the 30th as well.
Okay. Alderman Fleming.
I have a clarification question. With this, given the staff the direction, I guess Sarah or Alderman Ruth Simmons, when the assessment is done by the staff, can we see that at some point? I mean, I'm interested in the assessment, so I would like to have it before July 30th if it's finished. Is that, are you saying that the July 30th is going to be the assessment and whatever work we're giving to the commission?
Again, that's the council's direction. I think, as Ms. Flack said, the white paper that was done initially contains a lot of that information from an assessment standpoint. So, Sarah, I'm not sure from your view, from Savannah's view, how much additional work would be required for an assessment?
just the assessment of the units that are the gap could.
Current conditions to the best that we're able to quantify them.
We could certainly pull together that in probably
30 days, 45 days?
Yeah, either of those, 30 or 45.
So maybe we would commit by June 1st to have that assessment. So that would give it to you 6 weeks before or actually 60 days before the council would talk about it again.
Okay,
would that be
that's
sufficient?
great. Yeah, I just didn't want to prolong that if it did need to be prolonged.
Again, I think as what has been mentioned, the needs are overwhelming. The needs in all categories and all classifications and all types are overwhelming, and we will never have the resources to fulfill all those needs. And I think, what we've been trying to do is to be as honest and straightforward with that as possible. We can look more granularly at this, but the reality is we still won't have the resources. So, again, we'll get you the assessment by June 1, and then we'll come back on July 30 with more of an outline of what a planning process might look like.
Alderman Braithwaite.
I guess a question, Alderman Simmons, or also staff. So will this assessment, in listening to the conversation, I'm hoping it will include the stock. So what is out there in terms of, is that what you're asking? Both city monitored as well as what's within our non-for-profit community. So somewhere when we see this data, it'll give us a full menu of what's available to our residents. Is that what you're looking for?
And then what's needed.
And what's needed. Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
And the data on the available housing units is, at least for rental, is in the also in the white paper. What the number of rent-restricted units. Affordable ownership is a little harder. We don't have as much control over that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And Sarah, while you're up there was one other open item on the housing, which was Alderman Fleming had asked about that property, I think on South Boulevard. If there's any update on that, Alderman Fleming?
So actually, I went through my emails and I saw that way back in October, Ricky gave me the numbers. It just never came back to committee. Okay. So I guess I would like to make well, never mind. I don't want to make a referral.
Okay. Okay.
Well, right. I can give you an update. Paul Zalmazak has been taking the lead on that, and Paul and I have been working both with the Housing Authority and looking at other properties along that in that block to try to figure out what we might be able to aggregate and whether or not it could be a mixed-use development that goes all the way to Chicago, or if we would be looking mostly just at the two parcels that we already have. We haven't resolved some of those, but the Housing Authority is very interested in working with us on it. And so I expect that in the relatively near future, we will have two projects involving the Housing Authority to bring the 1900 Sherman project more quickly, but we're having some difficulties resolving whether or not we can, as I say, expand and perhaps look at an even larger development than just the two parcels, or whether or not we just go ahead and look at that. Okay.
Terrific. Okay. Is there anything else on housing that folks want to talk about before we move on to priority-based budgeting? All right, which is the third important topic today, and I have said before, and other people up here have, and I said in my State of the City address that while we have many good things going on and continue to have great things going on in the community, we certainly have financial challenges ahead of us, and the city manager is going to lead us through a process of priority-based budgeting. We've started that process much earlier in the year to talk about our 2019 budget, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about 2018. That budget has been set. So, city manager, would you like to start off this conversation? This is on SP6. One thing just before then, did I need to take a vote of the council on SP2, which was to accept and place on file the affordable housing work plan updates? It had that for action.
Sure, if you'd like.
Okay, so can someone move that motion if they're willing?
Move that we accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, SP2 passes City Council 8-0 to accept and place on file. Okay, City Manager, SP6.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're here with an update. We have tried to be diligent in doing this in measured steps moving forward. We were here a couple of months ago with sort of the initial ideas. We've done some additional work. Hitesh Desai, our Chief Financial Officer, is here. I thought maybe Hitesh could start us with just some overall comments as to what we've done on where we're going, and Ms. Luce Lakin's at the podium, so my guess is she'll probably take it from there. But Hitesh, if you could just, since you're new, I think a first appearance on business before us, welcome again, and you're here just in time.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you, Manager Popkowitz. Yes, as you must have seen, all of the council members, we have prepared a detailed memo on the priority-based budgeting. And it involves various steps, how we have arrived at these things, you know, and what criteria we have used, what programs we have listed, and out of that, how many programs we plan to take it to the residents for their survey. And there's a reason for each program to how we have prioritized whatever the criteria and all that. And so summarize all that, like it is almost like a 9 or 10 pages memo with a detailed listing of the programs. And we thought that it would be best to kind of summarize in a short PowerPoint presentation. So without disclosing much, I would give it to the Kate to kind of go through that. And after the presentation, we would be here. Ashley King is here, the Budget and Finance Manager, to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Hitesh. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Mayor Haggerty, members of council, Clerk Reed, and City Manager Bob Quitz. My name is Kate Luce-Lake, and I'm the Senior Management Analyst, and I am here to present you an update on our priority-based budgeting process. So I'm going to do a quick review of the measures that were used in the process so far. We presented those first at the March 19th City Council meeting, so just to go over those again. I'll do an overview of our staff process so far, show you the outcomes of our staff process, the ranked list that came out of that, and a preview of the public engagement process that we are planning for May. So again, we came to you in March 19th, with an overview of this process and presented the measures that we would be using throughout it. So we have since come up with a list of about 152 programs that cover the wide range that we do across the city, every department, every fund. And we have applied these 5 basic program attributes to all of those programs. So these are measuring whether we are required to provide the service in some way, whether there was a cost recovery of it, whether the service recovers its costs, if demand has been increasing, if the community relies on the city to provide the service, and the portion of the community that's served by the service. So every program received a 0 to 4 score on each of these measures, so that we could see where the programs were stacking up in regard to these. We got the scores on these measures from the department staff, and then they were reviewed by the Law and Finance Department staff for accuracy. The next set of measures were the City Council goals. So all 6 of the City Council goals for 2018 were considered here. Programs received a score from 0 to 4 based on whether or not the program was considered essential to achieving the goal, whether it had an indirect benefit, or whether it was not related. These were scored by an interdepartmental team that we pulled together that was all of the management analysts or of someone of a similar level from all departments. So these are people who are familiar with their department's entire operations, all of the programs and services involved, but we're not the department director. We all got in a room for about 4 hours total and went through the whole list to come up with a consensus on how we were ranking these programs based on their relation to City Council goals. To go into a little bit more detail on equity, we did not have this fleshed out by the time we came to you March 19th. This is the language we came up with in order to score equity as part of this process. We worked with colleagues in Boise, Idaho to get the beginnings of this language, who are also doing a priority-based budgeting process. And then Pat Effium, our equity and empowerment coordinator, tweaked this a little bit and was also in the room for the interdepartmental team. She was part of that group to help us go through the ranking on this measure. So the outcome of this process has been a ranked list of 152 programs, and these were included in the packet for tonight's meeting. We took out the top half, about 75 programs. These are programs that were required to provide them either by the state or the federal government. Many of them have a high cost recovery. They meet a number of city council goals, and we're setting them aside for the moment. They are, of course, not out of discussion, but for a later stage of the budget process. The bottom 78 it ended up being, we pulled 24 of those out that are required to be provided, again, either by state or federal, and have said these are a better list to look at for right sizing, for maybe higher fees if they need to recover their costs better, or for some sort of consolidation within how the city provides the service. Those not required ones got us to a list of 54 programs, and these are what we would really like to move forward with in the process. So these are programs that are not required. They were on the bottom half of our staff's ranked list, and we would like to bring these to the public in terms of asking how we could consider changes in how the service is being provided. So that is that list, and it's pretty small up here, but again, it is contained in the memo that's in the packet in a little bit larger font. So the next steps that we are looking at, so with that list of 54 programs, we've put together a survey that we'll be taking to the residents. We will include this list of all 54 programs in addition with a description of the programs so residents have a bit better understanding of what these things are that we're doing on a daily basis in the city. We'll ask residents to choose the 10 services that they consider most important that the city continue to provide, and 10 for the city to consider for reduction, for elimination, or for changes. We'll also have a few open-ended questions on the survey, so looking for residents to be able to have an opportunity to name their top 3 priorities for the city and 3 areas where they believe the city can find some savings for the upcoming budget. And then any additional ideas, of course, we'll have some open-ended space, again, to just get any other ideas that residents may have about our upcoming budget. And then we will also, we have a few demographic questions on the survey to ensure that we're getting a wide range of Evanston residents. So the process that we are proposing, the survey will be available online May 10th through 31st, so that's 3 weeks that residents can get onto the website. We'll promote it on our Twitter, on Facebook, etc., and give us their input in that way. We'll also make sure there are printed copies at the community centers and library. Phone responses will be accepted through the 311 Center, and then we'll be holding an in-person open house on May 24th from 3 to 8 p.m. There were another meeting or two on the agenda that evening, so we grabbed a large amount of time so that hopefully folks can stop in before or after those other meetings while they're in the Civic Center. And we propose to come back to City Council with an update on this whole public outreach process on June 18th.
Okay, I think Alderman Braithwaite may have a question.
Yes.
I was looking through the packet. Just quick question. Who was on the committee?
I'm sorry, the group who did the rankings?
That's correct.
The interdepartmental team? That was a representative from every department.
How many and who? Can you just rattle them off real quick?
It was 10 people, I believe. It was our myself, Ashley King for the city manager's office, Maureen Hernandez, also city manager's office, Pat F. Yum, Ike from the health department, Mario from the law department, Laura Biggs from public works, Jim Hurley from community development, Lou Gergitz from police, and Mike Whalen from fire.
And it was contained in an email that we sent this afternoon.
Yes.
I missed that. Okay.
Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, could you provide the list in an Excel spreadsheet form so we can sort as we wish?
Yep, absolutely. And we've also, we just made today a page specifically under the budget's website for priority-based budgeting. So there are links on there, and we've linked it to our open data site. So we have put the whole spreadsheet, all of these onto our open data site for those who have accessed that resource before. And this does wrap us up. So any other questions?
So yeah, we'll have a conversation up here. Questions, Alderman Nguyen?
This is just a sort of mechanical, mechanical question with respect to the survey. Do we test out the surveys beforehand to see how they operate? Because at my ward meeting last Thursday, people who were taking the streetlight survey pointed out that it was set up in such a way that only one person could only take the survey once. Okay. But in order to, and I'm not sure that your survey will have this, but in order to take the survey effectively, you needed, the streetlight survey, you need to have reviewed the materials and visited the sites before you ever open the survey, because once you've opened the survey, you're committed. So, and this is something I'd like the staff to address. So I'd like to just, if we could test that, just to make sure, pick some guinea pigs out of the community, us maybe, and have us try it so that we know the operation of it, so that we don't end up with people engaging and then finding that they don't actually have sufficient information to effectively take the survey. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And we can absolutely. It's a pretty simple survey. This one's on SurveyMonkey, so there shouldn't be any blacking out or anything on this one. But we'd be happy to.
But I do think it's important for if we can put information into the material before people take the survey, explaining that once they've opened it, if it's on SurveyMonkey, they're committed. There is no backing out. This is the time that they must complete it. That's their only opportunity. So I think it's important for people to understand that just don't open it thinking, oh, I've got a couple minutes here and I'll finish it later, because you can't. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will double check that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Fisk.
Yeah, I'm wondering why we have where we're mandated to provide the service. I'm wondering why that's in the ranking list. I mean, if we have to provide it, why are we talking about it?
That's a great question.
And I think that's precisely the point, so that if it's ranked high enough, then we don't talk about it.
So is this...
Well...
Go ahead, because I'll...
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but...
Well, and
I mean, if we're not going to make any what would result in cuts because we need to provide this service, then I think it just makes our list unduly long.
I guess I could rephrase it a little bit.
And I'd also like to know, well, a couple more things. When you ask people to rank things on a survey,
it takes away, it's distracting.
Well, it's distracting, yeah, but I'm not sure that everyone understands what each one of these categories is. And if you want to go through and just do a one sentence explanation, if you can, I mean, these are very complicated.
And as Ms. Lewis-Lakin said, that's the next piece of this, is that there will be information and costs, because I think the cost of providing the service is an issue. Speaking to the mandated provide service, it's a 1 through 4 ranking. Right. And so, perhaps we could eliminate those that were 4. I'm not sure that there are any that were ranked 4, but if it's less than 4, then that mandate is not necessarily us.
Right. Well, there's a bunch of 4s on there.
Right. Police services can't be, we have to provide them. It's not practical for us to have that provided elsewhere. Sports fields, we need to maintain them, but the city staff doesn't necessarily have to maintain them. So that would give it probably a score of less than 4. Again, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify, places where perhaps we could make reductions. And we want to inform the community on these various points, but we also don't want to make the list so small that we come to the end of the process and then nothing can be eliminated. And so we're trying, there's a balance there.
No, and I understand that. I mean, but there are a whole bunch of 4s on here that I'm not sure we need to be discussing if we are not allowed by law to make changes to them or to eliminate them or modify them in any way.
And so if you're looking at the full list, so it starts on page 120, that's not the list we're using. So we're basically using the last half of that list.
So
okay,
on 115, you're using the list on 115.
We're using the list on 115. That does not have all the rankings next to it. But if you look at the categories as you look further in with the full rankings, I mean, certainly what we can do is look at the 4s as you go further down. On the very last page, I see it looks like 1-4 as far as fleet maintenance. And that's the only 4 on the last page. So we're happy to go back there. Again, our bottom line is to try to come up with a list that's reasonable and that will get community feedback that's reasonable. If we go through this and nothing can be cut, then we have wasted the time and energy of many, many people. So we're trying to make this as realistic as possible.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the services that have 4s in terms of cost are paying for themselves or exceeding that, or actually making money from that.
Correct. That if it's a 4, it means they're covering, I believe, 100% of their costs.
Okay. One of the things that I had discussed with the city manager that I'd like more information on is, and again, I know nothing about this, but I am curious, what if we established our own parks,
District.
a district. I think we talked about that a couple of years ago, but I don't remember what the discussion was. And I'm curious as to what would happen if we had an elected parks board and it would be a separate taxing body.
All right, Alderman Braithwaite and Alderman Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Wally, I think you answered my question, so I shouldn't focus on the multi-detailed list on page 119 all the way down, right? Ignore that?
We're focused this evening on the list on page 115.
Okay.
And again, what we've tried to do this evening is make this as manageable as possible. We did not want to include too many small type graphs for you. We're happy, again, to provide the spreadsheet as is so you can mix and match. Members of the community can mix and match. But the list that's on 115 meets the criteria that Ms. Luce-Lakin described.
So I remember I was with the mayor over the weekend, and I asked specifically, for example, the summer food program for child nutrition. I thought that we received either federal or state dollars for that program. I didn't think, and I could be wrong, that the funding for that was from taxpayer dollars. Am I incorrect, or?
No, we may receive funding for that, Alderman Braithwaite. It may not completely cover its costs, and maybe that's the reason.
Okay.
I would have to look at the detail to know exactly why it fell to where it did on the list. But
right. And again,
I think
question of who
that
was
would be
on
possible.
that committee. So I guess, and I understand the exercise, and I get it. I think it's useful, and maybe if I piggyback off of what Alderman Nguyen says, I'm hoping, and if I missed that in your presentation, I apologize, that there's a dollar amount tagged to this, and I probably missed that. You probably said it. And then realistically, if there are things that receive funded by dollars other than our taxpayer dollars, I think that they should be eliminated. I can't speak for everyone else, but I received a couple of phone calls over the weekend where there were people that were actually concerned and scared that we're going to lose. And if that's part of the whole exercise to wake up the town, then I get it. But I think if we can be responsible with the programs that we know that we're going to keep, that we know we receive federal or state funding, I think it's important to either segregate those or just completely move them from the list, is my thought.
And Alderman Braithwaite, I think, as Ms. Luce-Lakin mentioned, some of these do get funding from other sources, but they do not cover the total amount. And there is nothing that says that we have to provide, for example, the summer food program. A nonprofit organization could do that. Another government agency could do that. Certainly, it's not something that every community around us provides. We do it because it's been a community standard and a community value. And if that continues to be a community standard, community value, we'll continue to do that. But as you look through this list, I think we're going to be hard-pressed to find anyone that says anything on this list is fluff or is something that is not serving a constituency of the city. And so that takes us kind of back to the beginning of the discussion, which is if everything is important and if there's not a willingness to raise taxes and fees and our expenses continue to rise, then how do we grapple with that? And that's why we're trying to start as early as possible. So if there are some things that people think are worth further discussion, that we have plenty of opportunity and time for community discussion, council discussion on those matters.
Thank you, City Manager. Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, thank you. So I spent a lot of time with this, and I appreciate that we're using some kind of system to get where we need to go with our budget. I echo what Alderman Braithwaite said about programs that are funded separately. So that was good to hear, because I also picked up on the certificate of rehab program, which I believe comes out of CDBG, which is one that's listed as, having low cost recovery according to our document here. So, I have those same concerns about those type of programs. I also, I guess just to mention a couple more on here, so I see community services and youth engagement listed here, which concerns me, because I think we might maybe all agree that department serves a population of students and people that we want to keep engaged here in the community and try to keep on the right path. Anyway, I know we'll have time to go through all of them, but those were some that I was surprised were on the list. My other concern, I guess, and I vocalized this to city staff, was that while I appreciate, the scoring, I always am concerned when things are scored with no, very objective matrix. So I understand that you had a diverse group of people kind of working through this. However, when we look at things like change in demand for service, I hope, and because I didn't get the information, maybe I'm speaking out of line, but I would hope that there were numbers looked at for each program to decide if we had a change in service. The same thing with the portion of community served. I would hope that we looked at who's calling for tree replacement or whatever these programs are to make sure we had an accurate measure of that, and it wasn't just like, well, I think only people in the South Evanston do that, so I'm marking it a 2. So whenever we are using a matrix, again, maybe I wasn't in the 4-hour meeting, so I don't have it, but I would hope that there was some actual data given or provided by the different departments so that we knew that these scores are actually based on what we see happening in the city and not what the individual staff members' assessment is from their seat. And I talked to Dr. Ephraim about this also in terms of the equity piece. I do appreciate that we are starting this and we went somewhere with this. This assessment the same way, right? How is this measured? So are we looking at who programs currently serve to know if they are, where they fall between the 0 and the 4, or am I making that assumption as a staff member? I am not personally very excited by who we have as historically unrepresented populations. It, to me, is everyone but white men, which is fine. But I think when I just have age on here, am I talking about young people? Am I talking about older people? Immigrant status, we probably don't necessarily have, data on that. Language and or socioeconomic are very different. So there's just some, I think I like that it's a start. I'm a little concerned that it's what we're using through and through, because we're talking about cutting services, potentially cutting jobs. And if we're not very clear, particularly on the equity and the who it serves, so this portion of community serves, which to me is an equity question also, we potentially look at cutting services for folks who might not come to community meetings, might not do the survey, we might not ever hear from until we cut their service. So I would hope that as staff is going through this and as we're going through this, and even as you go out to the community, that aside from the numbers part that's given, that there is some more information if we're asking people to rank things. I'm a little bit fearful that we're going to get a lot of very loud people who are concerned about a very small topic because they have the time and the interest in advocating. And so we're going to hear a lot about trees and all those things we just heard about in the last budget, but maybe not hear from Alderman Braithwaite's folks who are calling about having their kids fed in the summer. So I like that we are starting early. I like that we are trying to use a matrix. I would like to see a more developed matrix. I would encourage you all also, as you have time, I would love to have you at my ward meeting, because I know I'll get about 30 folks there who might not come here on the 28th or whatever day we're doing the open house, no matter how much I encourage them to do that. So I do applaud, the city manager and the staff for starting early. I think last year for me was a little bit of a disaster, but I really, if we're going to say we're going to use a matrix, I really want to see a fleshed out, well-defined matrix based on something more than the staff's perception or my perception.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to extend the time period. My next ward meeting is the first Tuesday in June, and I think You mentioned that this period ends, what, May 31st?
May 31st was what we had proposed to have the survey.
Okay, if we could extend that, I think it's a really good idea to take it to the public so that we can hear from them in real time and not just on a survey. Boy, this is hard. No one said it was going to be easy. So my understanding from what's been said here tonight is that there are going to be some numbers attached to this.
What we'll do.
And when?
So our plan is to start this in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So over the next 2 weeks, we'll formalize what goes on the website. We'll share that with you. We'll have a brief description of each of the categories and a dollar amount.
Okay.
For each.
And can I get you to agree to the first Tuesday in June? I don't know what the date is.
Sure. We were looking at Thursday, so why don't we just go ahead we'll extend it to Thursday, June the 7th. Our plan is to come back to the council, I think it was on the third Monday in June on the 18th. So that will be, I think, give us an idea. And again, what we will come back with really is data. I mean, we will not make any conclusions, we will not make any decisions, but really just to share with you what we've discovered and then to try to get some additional direction from you as we move forward. The goal will be, as always, to have a budget for you the second week in October. And so whatever feedback we get, through the middle, latter part of June, we will then have the entire summer to work on, refine, and also I think really ask the council, if we end this process with a relatively small list of reductions, then what else? Where else would you like us to go? We'll be negotiating with our labor groups, so that certainly our costs associated with those labor contracts come into all that. But I think we're, again, trying to get as much of a head start on this as possible.
I'm curious, if what is the total for all of these programs that's here on the list? Have you figured that out?
It's the general fund, so
yeah.
It's 114
million. General fund is 118 million. So.
Yeah, but we don't have fire or police in here. I mean, those two are 55.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
60
for the 54.
Yeah, it's probably a quarter.
Okay.
Of the budget, because if you figure the police and fire is, I think, largely non-represented, that's over 50% of the budget right there.
Okay.
Of the general fund budget. So again, one of those challenges of this process, is to look at those things that are not required. I mean, will we need to ultimately, depending on where this comes out, look at police and fire? Absolutely. I think this will likely be the first budget that I will present to you that will likely have reductions in police and fire, because we will not be able to make any kind of significant dent in our operating costs and not raise revenues without looking at our costs associated with police and fire. And then I think it becomes the question, what are the impacts of that? And so we will spend much of the fall, my guess, talking about that as well. As you said, Alderman Fisk, this is not an easy process, but to truly believe, in order to move forward and not to tax our residents any further significantly, it's one we really are incumbent upon us to take on.
Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, thank you. Could we have a memo from Dr. Effiam about how the equity lens was used, and maybe flesh out a little bit? I'm on the Equity and Empowerment Commission, so if we could just have maybe a little bit of a memo from Dr. Effiam just explaining how that equity lens was used in this process, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess if we could, again, not to slow the process, but just to make sure we're getting good information. Looking through this, I can't, there's a lot of information just mixed in. Mm-hmm. There's some capital, there's some programming. My first request would be to sort it by whatever. I mean, I can throw out capital projects, citywide programs, and there's some special things in here that sort of impact our most vulnerable people, our seniors, victim services, etc. Just so when I'm going through this that, I have some organizational filter in my mind.
Sure.
The second thing that I would also request is, again, as a matter of equity, to collect some demographic information. Of course, we want to make sure everyone's an Evanston resident. I would be curious to know if they're male or female, and if we can also capture race and age range, that would be important as well, because obviously there are some programs in here that are very gender specific, race specific, just based on some economics, but I think you understand where I'm going with it.
Yes,
All right.
that is included.
Well, no, just overall. I mean, I think, yes,
Or
with
do you mean the
respect.
people answering the survey?
People answering the survey.
Oh, yeah.
Because that would
They-
be too
no, no,
much to
right.
break it down each and individual, but just a general sense of, out of whatever percentage we get back,
Right.
does that population or sea of people reflect our Evanston demographic?
Yeah, because I think that Kate mentioned that's in here.
Okay. All right. So, seeing no more lights, and having, I appreciate everybody that chimed in on this. Is there a motion to put this forward to accept and place on file and have the city staff continue to move forward?
Move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, City SP6, updating on priority-based budgeting. It's been accepted and placed on file, and the city manager and his team will continue to move forward on this. All right, let's move to call of the wards. Excuse me. So we're going to do call of the wards. I'm going to let the clerk make an announcement or comment first, and then I'd like to go to Alderman Wilson.
I just want to make a quick announcement for all of the council members and folks who are on boards and commissions in the city. Just a reminder that tomorrow is the deadline for turning in financial disclosure and affiliation statements. You can come into the clerk's office throughout the day. We have a notary on hand, and if they're not in the office, we have someone in the building who can help you. So just stop in tomorrow at some point.
Thank you, Clerk Reed. I actually think, wasn't it today that you had to have it in by midnight? So if you haven't gotten it in, you got to get it in tomorrow. But those are very, very important for everybody. There's a notary in the clerk's office and Clerk Reed's office. So if somebody comes in, you can go down to Clerk Reed's office. Yep. Okay. Alderman Wilson.
No report.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Yes, thank you. A very special thank you to Rebuilding Together and about 400 other volunteers that renovated several homes here in town, including 4 in the 4th Ward, mostly to seniors, and a very special organization in town, Boys Hope, Girls Hope. And another thank you to the Rotary Club of Evanston, who will be planting 25 trees at Twiggs Park in the 5th Ward on this coming Saturday. All are welcome to join in and participate, and or just watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Simmons. Alderman Sufferton.
Sure. I'd like to make a referral and request to Administration of Public Works. I'd like to request the Parking Division Manager to provide a list and map of all restricted parking zones, including the capacity of the zone, the number of permits issued, the type of restriction, and the date established. I'd like to have a discussion about setting up a protocol where we review these on a periodic basis, all the zones in the entire city.
For the whole city? Some of that.
All I'm asking for right now is the information that should be here now. Where the zones are, the number of permits issued, the capacity of the zone, and the type of restriction and date established. I'm not asking for any outside information. It should all exist in this building right now.
Well, the capacity of the zone, you're going to have to do a study on literally every single zone in the city.
Right, but that was done when the zone was established.
Well, I mean capacity now or when it was done before?
The parking capacity. When the zone was established, it was established that 70% of the capacity was met. So you know the capacity of the street.
But that was, one might have been 10 years ago or 28 years ago.
Is there a focus on residential versus street versus
the street itself,
parking
the physical
lot?
street wouldn't have changed.
But that's not true. I mean, the streets change every year.
They get shorter and longer?
I mean, you're saying you want data for every single parking space in the entire city?
No, just for the residential zones, just the restricted zones.
He asked you if it's residential, and you said no. So.
All the restricted zones, right?
But we sell more permits.
All the restricted residential zones.
I'm sorry. If you live in a like permit area C, the city doesn't go out and count all of the parking spaces on the street because every resident who lives within that residential district C, you could have no cars, you could have 5 cars. So the city doesn't say, you can only have 2 permits.
Actual permits issued. I mean, it should be.
No, but wait,
So
I'm confused.
If you apply for a permit from the city, and the city says, here's your permit, that would be a permit issued. It's not eligibility for the permit. The actual permit's issued.
But you said capacity.
The capacity of the street.
So you've kind of mixed up some concepts here.
But we don't calculate that when we're issuing residential permit.
When you're establishing eligibility for a residential zone, one of the criteria is 70% of the capacity of the street.
So you want just the ones where we're issuing resident-only permits?
Yes.
Okay, that's really different because all restrictions, would include 2 hours in the morning.
Right. Well, if you've got a zone where it's 2 hours for non-residents, that's a residential zone.
So do you want that data also?
Yes. I'm not asking for anything that the city shouldn't already have.
Well, for example, around some of the train stations, there's a no parking from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. without a city sticker. You want that also?
No. If it's restricted to not just Evanston residents, if it's restricted to residents of a zone.
If I can.
So let's go to since we're going to have a conversation about this right now, let's go to Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Braithwaite. And everybody, I'll just ask that you use your lights.
Okay, so my understanding is that these districts were created by ordinance and that they can be amended by ordinance. The A district, which is a huge district in my ward, has recently had some changes, but my understanding was that Jill was looking at bringing into compliance the district boundaries with addresses in them, because we've had some instances where people in my ward who are used to getting permits were not allowed to get permits this year. So I think she's doing some active work on that. I just don't want to.
I'm not asking for any action. I'm just asking for the information.
Okay, I just want to make sure the information that goes out is correct, because I think there's a review going on right now, unless I'm mistaken, which I don't think I am.
Okay. My concern is, again, I'm always concerned about the amount of work that we're placing on our city staff. Right. We're going through a priority-based budgeting. We're going through lots of other things right now. And so I'd be very interested, is this just a, one-day exercise, or is this, a 100-hour exercise to get all this information together? So perhaps we can talk about that later. But let's go Alderman Braithwaite, and then we'll go to Alderman Wilson.
And maybe this will help us move forward, and I don't think we have to flush it out tonight, but my recommendation, Alderman Sufford, and I always like to start with what problem are we trying to solve, and maybe when you sit with staff you can provide the focus, because I'm thinking, my priority isn't the parking in the 9th Ward. I have enough on my plate to worry in the 2nd. So maybe if you're starting with your ward or a specific area, that may be the place to start, and then if you don't get the data that you're looking for, you can expand. But again, not knowing what problem you're trying to solve.
I'm happy to do just the 6th Ward, but I think it's a citywide issue. And what I'm telling you is the permits for this year have been issued, right? There's spreadsheets saying, here are all the permits for this zone, this zone, this zone. It's not creating new work. The spreadsheets exist. I just want them all gathered in one place so we can have a discussion. That's all. I'm not asking for any creation of new work. The work has been done. The information exists. I want it all collated, put together, so we can have a discussion, administration, public works about it.
All right, Alderman, do you want to follow up with a question?
Yeah, I think is it a fair assumption that you're focusing on a specific area in your ward?
I would like an examination of parking in a particular area of my ward, but I think we should also look at the entire city, especially if it's information that already exists. I'm not asking for outside consultants. I'm asking
I got you.
staff.
No, I get
just
it.
Stuff that exists.
We all have parking issues. It's just a matter of prioritizing where that is on our individual plates, as well as utilizing staff time. So,
correct. Alderman Wilson and then Alderman Nguyen.
Okay. Well, a couple things. I have the impression that you're trying to address like 1 or 2 blocks in your ward, but I know when people hear about this, one of the aldermen is requesting all of the information for every restricted part. It's going to make everybody in the entire city who lives in one of those districts
bananas.
Think, oh my God, they're going to undo my parking stuff. So, I think it's.
I am not looking to undo anything. I am just looking for all of the information.
But okay, so how much I just say you're saying you're looking for all of the information, but it's not clear to me information about what. So let me just ask a couple questions so I can understand what you're asking for. So, are you asking only for districts where people are buying resident permits?
Yes.
Only that?
That's
So you're not asking for, if there's a 2-hour restriction for Evanston residents only in the morning, you're not asking for that?
No, I'm fine with Evanston resident parking. Places where an Evanston resident who is not in that zone cannot park.
Well, then that's
right. I want a list of the restrictions, right? Some of them are restricted all day. Some are non-residents are limited to 2 hours. Residents with a particular designation can stay all day.
So, I mean, why don't you just get the map and look at it
There is no
yourself?
map. I've asked Jill for a map. Show me all the zones. Here's what I'm asking for. Again, a list of the zones, a list of the restrictions.
For your ward.
I'll take my word. I think we should look at it as a city, but if you want to make it just my ward, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, but you also, in the very beginning, you said, so we can have something
I think it's
along
a
the lines.
citywide issue. I think that we should have a comprehensive citywide policy, not ward by ward.
You said citywide policy to revisit on a regular basis, something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I think that we should have a discussion whether it should be revisited on a 5-year basis, a 7-year basis, a 10-year basis.
Okay. Well, you can have that discussion. I think that would be a horrifying thing to do to people. Like every 5 years, you're going to have to, because the process is extensive and it's very labor intensive for both the staff and the individuals. And just to put people, people would probably move. I mean, like if you're going to think like, oh, I'm going to have to fight over whether we can park or not every 5 years, that's not going to feel good to people. So, I think you just need to think it through a little more, as you kind of develop what you're trying to accomplish. I think you're probably trying to do a specific thing.
I think we should look at it. I think we should look at all the things that we do on a periodic basis and see if they're being done in the most fair and equitable manner.
All right, we got lots of lights. We got lots of lights up here.
Flesh it out, maybe.
It's just a reference
This has been the most
for discussion, which we've already
active call of the words we've ever had. All right, Alderman Nguyen, and then we're going to go to Alderman Fleming, and then I might have a comment or two.
First of all, this should come to transportation and parking, because that's whatever question you have, Alderman Sufferton, should come to transportation and parking, because that's the normal route that it goes to.
But that's not an alderman-only committee.
No, it doesn't matter. That's the place of first instance that any parking issue comes to at the council. We have economic development. That's not an alderman-only committee, but all of that stuff eventually comes to the city council. So that's number one. But number two is I don't think it should go to ANPW. It should go to transportation and parking. And I completely agree with Alderman Wilson and Alderman Braithwaite. I mean, even last Wednesday, despite the fact that you had written to your constituents and told them that there would be no action, we had 10 or 15 people at transportation and parking because they want to be there. They want to be there. So there are maps of the city. I've seen the maps of the city. Every time that we have an issue, we've seen maps. So, and I also don't understand what capacity is, because as I said, I live in Zone C. So that means that it's open parking for anybody who wants to come all day long on one side of the street. On the other side of the street, it's called resident 2-hour exemption. So people with a C sticker can park there as long as they want. People without a C sticker can only park there for 2 hours. So, and that's a very common designation throughout Evanston. So but there is no number on what's the capacity of the street, because currently we've owned 1 car, we've owned 3 cars. Currently there are only 2 cars at my house. But we've had stickers for all 3 at different times. But there was never a restriction on how many stickers I could get, resident stickers I could get. It wasn't governed by the size of my street.
Right. But here's what I'm saying.
If you just want the number of stickers, I mean, I urge you to look at the 6th Ward, because
I would love to.
The 3rd Ward, and you and I talked about this today, do an analysis of the 6th Ward, because I am telling the 3rd Ward not to worry about this.
I'm happy to do an analysis exclusively of the 6th Ward.
I'm down the 4th Ward.
But I will say, when the zone is created, there is a measurement of percentage of capacity. That's the total amount of cars that can park on a street. It's a known number. 70% of that capacity is what is used to determine eligibility for the zone.
Alderman Sufferton, I've lived at my address for 30 years. I needed to get a parking sticker if I wanted to park on a particular side of my street the day I moved in.
I don't know what that how that's relevant to what I'm talking about.
But you're asking.
It's a good story, but what does it have to do with what I'm talking about?
No, it's not a good story. I'm telling you, are we going to go back to 1988 and find out what the analysis was to determine whether there was 70% parking on that side of the street?
What was the capacity of the street that was used to measure it? That's all I'm looking for.
But the records are old.
What was the capacity
The
of the
idea
street?
that
Your block is the same length it was the day you moved in.
600 feet.
Right? Okay, so when they were determining capacity, right, there's a formula they must use. A certain length is how long a vehicle is. And maybe that's changed with time. I don't know. I would leave that to Jill Veland to figure out what formula they use when they determine, and maybe there's a new driveway, maybe there's a new curb cut, maybe there's a new fire hydrant.
But not every street in the city is 600 feet long. You can just go out and measure it. You'll see south of Main Street and the 3rd Ward, the blocks are different lengths because it used to be South Evanston.
I would like to just
I don't support this.
Of course you don't, because you've been in charge of parking and transportation.
Is it my turn?
I don't support this because you're wasting staff time. None of us can understand what you're trying to do. Why would staff understand what you're trying to do?
All right. So here's the thing. I think generally speaking, right, I think if a staff puts something forward or an alderman puts something forward, there's generally not an objection and everything else. Obviously, we've had a heated conversation tonight on just this call of the wards and what Alderman Suffredin has put forward. I'd like to just sort of put this to a vote. If there's a second to of Alderman Suffredin's motion to have the city staff compile this information.
Second.
I can second, but I have a question.
There's a second, and then let me go to Alderman Fleming, then Alderman Fisk, because those were how the lights were on.
So I guess I was getting to where you are, Mayor, which is aside from maybe just Alderman Suffredin cleaning up his technicality, if staff has a question and they call him, I guess I'm puzzled that we are having a huge debate about an aldermanic motion, right? I feel like other aldermen make motions that I don't necessarily agree with or I think are beneficial, but I don't say, particularly from the dais, you shouldn't make that motion. I can clarify, but I guess I'm concerned if this is our time to direct staff and look for information that we're looking for to have to a committee, if we're now going to start voting on whether or not elected officials have the right to ask for information, I think that is a place that I am uncomfortable with us being, because any motion that someone makes that I think is unworthy, I can start a debate on and call a vote, and then how are we going to get the business of our communities done if we are just hindering? Now, again, I'm all for getting clarity, and I think if Alderman Suffredin makes a motion and staff is unclear on that, then staff can or council can get clarity. But in terms of if we think it's worthwhile or not, is an area I think that we should not be going in terms of what aldermen are looking to get accomplished in their ward or information they're trying to gather to do their job well.
And would it be safe to follow up by saying maybe Alderman Suffredin that you...
we got Alderman Fisk. Alderman Fisk, then Braithwaite.
Recommend he meets with the city manager. Just recommend that you meet with the city manager to get your question focused, and then if it looks like it's going to be a bigger project, then we can bring it to the committee. But I would suggest starting there.
Right.
I understand your concern.
Okay, and in making it citywide, I was trying to be as global and equitable as possible. If you all want it just to be my ward, I'm happy with that. I'm not asking for any special treatment in terms of my ward being examined versus others. But I do think it is appropriate to ask the parking manager questions about parking. That's not a waste of staff time. That's exactly what staff is there to do. Right? I'm not demanding it tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I will go. I've had conversations with Jill. Let me know how long you need to get this together. A lot of it is information that already exists. Right? I could do a FOIA. We could go that way. But that's not the way we should run this government. If someone has a question and wants information to make informed decisions about the future, not backwards looking, I think that's something we should encourage up here.
Well, the way you originally stated the request, it seemed really overly broad, and it seemed like it was going to take an extraordinary amount of time and effort. If now that you've fleshed it out and pared it down to just the specific kinds of districts, that's a big difference than all restricted parking in the city.
If I just as an example, right? I'm not going to go into your ward and start tearing up signs, but like parking around Robert Crown is an issue that affects my constituents. Right? Just as an example, right? We're all in this city together. We represent these arbitrary geographic areas, but decisions about parking need to be made with a longer-term focus than what's expedient at a particular moment or what's relevant at a particular moment. All the parking adjacent to business districts is subject to change. Business districts change, types of businesses change. We don't ever look at that. We don't have a routine review. We don't talk to economic development about parking zones that have already been established. These are things we should all do. Parking is a huge issue, right? And when we make a restricted zone, that's great for the people who are within it, but the people outside of it, who are also our constituents, pay the price. Not every time, not every one of them is wrong, but we need to have some sort of formula where we look at it from time to time, because otherwise they're just going to always be more of them. And we're never going to question whether they're still relevant or important.
Well, I think you've limited your universe of what you're looking for, which makes it...
Yeah, I'm happy to make it just the 6th Ward. If that's the most fair and judicious use of staff time, I don't want to waste any.
And it's just the sticker zones, right?
It's the sticker zones, any sort of restricted parking near the business district. The residential area, what I want to look at is the whole residential area adjacent to Central Street, right? Because that's where people park who don't want to feed the meters. And as we raise the price on the meters, it's foolish to think that people are just going to pay the meters. They're going to park on Hartzell or on Hurd or on any of the streets nearby and walk half a block. We need to have some sort of plan for those residents, right? And maybe we need to make bigger zones, maybe smaller zones, more restrictive, less restrictive. I don't know. I just want information so we can make an informed decision.
All right. So he's asking for information right now, 6th Ward. Alderman Fisk, you want to keep this going?
So the all of the districts are included in the city code. And if you, when you go to them, you can click on the ordinance that created them.
Right.
So it's real easy to figure that out.
Right, but there's no map that shows where they all are. They're all, you can go through the code and see them by worded out. You can put an address in. You can put an address in and see if that's in a zone.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to the ordinance that originally created.
I don't want to change a single ordinance. I just want information.
No, I'm just saying that it's that it's there. It's not.
But then, so that would mean city staff could do it for him even faster, right? I mean, if it's all there, city staff could do that.
All right here.
This, right? I mean, I think we do have staff. We don't want to overburden them, but we do have staff for staff reasons. We are all part-time employees.
Or if you stay up real late, you can do it yourself.
You can, or we can add staff.
City Manager Bob Quitz.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff has been talking with Alderman Sufferton. We've, I think, have had a good collaborative working discussion on this. We're committed to get you what you need. My only concern is the capacity issue, and we'll give you our best answer without spending a whole lot of time. I think one of the reasons you have the reference issue is there's the potential to have staff doing a lot of larger projects that are all good and meaningful things, but your staff does have a limited capacity. So I think in my years as city manager, the understanding has been we'll give you the best that we can within a certain amount of effort. If it's something that needs more after you've gotten the initial bit of information, then you have the larger discussion. So we're happy to give Alderman Sufferton. I guess I just would have the question, is it the 6th Ward or is it citywide? We'll do either. And we'll give it the best information that we have. We'll give you the best capacity information we have, with the caveat, as I think some of you have mentioned, these are decisions that go back many, many years. Our minutes from meetings, certainly past 10 years ago, are not as complete as perhaps we would like them to be. So, but we will give you our best effort always. So, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if the request is 6th Ward or citywide, but once that's answered,
I'm happy to make it 6th Ward. If anybody else wants in, go for it. If not, I understand.
Alderman Sufferton, now that you've explained it more clearly, I would support you looking at 6th Ward. And I would be happy to hear what your results are, because I agree with you. We need to continually modify and look again at all of our city programs. My point is we have to do it in a methodical way with lots of notice and lots of community input on every single step of the way, because otherwise people misunderstand.
All right, so we got 6th Ward. Did you want in, Alderman Fleming? All right, 6th and 9th Ward. Okay. Alderman Revelle. We're on call of the wards, in case anyone's forgotten.
Okay, just real briefly, I'd like to follow up on Alderman Ruth Simmons. Big thank you to Rebuilding Together. They did an amazing job for a homeowner in the 7th Ward, and she is just thrilled to pieces. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to join Alderman Ruth Simmons and Alderman Revelle in thanking the Rebuilding Together team. As it's been previously stated, 6 to 8 homes in the 2nd, 5th, and 7th Ward. I especially want to acknowledge Kinsey Group, Northwestern, and all the businesses, the organizations. Our city staff was out there, and all the volunteers. I mean, it was really an awesome event. And then that's followed up by a special acknowledgement to the Sergeant B. Williams Snell Post 7186. I was with the mayor and Cook County Commissioner Larry Suffordin as we celebrated the brave men and women who not only serve our country or who have served our country in foreign wars, but a majority of those group members also volunteer in Evanston. So it was just a great weekend all around. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, 2 items both happening on Thursday, May 3rd. I will have my regular office hours on Thursday, May 3rd from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Brothers K Coffee Shop, which is at the corner of Hinman and Main. And then that evening, we'll have the first meeting of the Garden Park renovation plan, which is also it's Thursday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. at Lincoln School. And I urge everyone to come out. This will be the first meeting, probably of a number of meetings, as we plan to renovate that park. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Anyone want to stay? All right, thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for watching from home. And this was a lively debate tonight.